Chapter 1506. Emolien lifted her small chin and solemnly nibbled on her lips. He chuckled softly and said, "I really won't lie. Jojo, we've known each other for so many years, but have you ever seen me lie to you? Of course, I won't lie to you." His cheek gently rubbed against the side of her face. Jojo, even if I lie to everyone in the world, I won't lie to you." Arbor's heart settled a little. She understood Emolien quite well. As long as it was something he promised, he would most likely perfectly resolve it within the time limit. So if he said 5 months, it would probably be less than 5 months. The 100-year prison sentence the sapling Chocho mentioned was most likely to scare her. Where was Little Tree? Little Tree. She was going to kill him later. "Okay, I believe you." Arbor nodded and said, 5 months, at the latest 5 months. "You must come and find me. You're not allowed to be late, or else I'll ignore you." Emolien hugged this willful little fellow and nodded in agreement. "Wait, since when do we start counting?" Emolien was taken aback, then he said exasperatedly, "I haven't left yet. Of course, it starts counting from the day we parted." Arbor puffed up her small cheeks and peeked at him with her large, watery eyes. "It's not today?" Emolien. That he was originally feeling a little sad, but why did he suddenly feel like laughing? His little stoic baby was seriously so comical. Emolien hugged her lovingly the entire way and said softly, "Let's return to the Eastern Palace. I still have something to tell you." On the way, Emolien told Arbor in detail about the High Priest at Siming Manor. No wonder the High Priest was willing to announce such an important piece of news like the Phoenix egg to the public. So it was because of this idea. Arbor shook his head. It seems that those people from Heavenly Fate are no longer satisfied with the status quo. They want to extend their evil claws to mystic cultivators and body cultivators. Their experiments need to be improved. It's just a pity that there are too few mystic cultivators and body cultivators available in their organization, so they've set their sights on the 8 great patrician families and some sections. Emolien also nodded in full agreement to this. "I also think so. Unfortunately, they underestimated your abilities. The entire underground base of the Mystic Beast Forest was swept clean by you in one fell swoop." Emolien curled his lips as he joyfully nuzzled Xiao Mu's petite body. "Xiao, do you worship hubby a lot?" Arbor nodded and praised, "You are really the smartest person I've ever met." As he said this, he pursed his lips as if he thought of something. "It's just a pity that High Priest and the Great Holy Lady are already dead, so we can't obtain any useful information." Emolien gave a before saying with a chuckle, "That's not necessarily the case. Duan Yu will definitely search their souls. Although they're already dead and the soul searching might not be effective, it's still better than nothing." The two returned to the Eastern Palace and wanted to rest for a bit, but who would have expected that the zombie army outside would be so impatient? Before it was deep into the night, the noisy group of zombies had already started attacking the Mo Kingdom capital. There was a small discrepancy between this time and the time Emolien calculated. It was early by more than 2 hours. However, it didn't matter much since their group had already made preparations. Chapter 1507. Speaking of which, it was strange that the zombies attacking the Mo Kingdom capital this time were like a well-trained army, advancing layer by layer towards the city walls like an ocean wave. At first, they only advanced on a small scale, but when they neared the northern city walls, a large number of zombies swiftly advanced towards the city walls, accompanied by waves of roars. It was as if there was some core in the zombie army directing them on how to attack and fight. However, for Emolien and the others, who had experienced Balon City's crisis, they had already developed a set of very effective countermeasures to deal with the zombies attacking the city. Arbor stood on the city gate tower as he watched the soldiers push the large catapults up the city gate tower. He only glanced at them briefly. This catapult had been modified, and there was even a groove for storing kerosene at the end. When the fire started burning, the soldiers on the side worked together to lift up a huge rock and throw it into the catapult. Arbor only saw that huge rock instantly caught in the raging fire and rolled all the way through the groove. It abruptly flew several dozen meters into the air and was sent flying out of the city walls with a bang, crashing into the zombie horde outside the city. This way, they could conserve a large amount of manpower such as mystic cultivators and body cultivators. With the help of this kind of catapult, ordinary soldiers could also enter the battlefield to fight against the zombie army as long as they hid behind the large catapults. More than 20 catapults were pushed up the city gate tower. However, these big guys were very cumbersome, and ordinary soldiers needed more than 10 people to push them up. This required a certain amount of time for mystic cultivators to attack from afar to fill in the gaps. Prince Mo and Duan Yu's group were currently standing on the edge of the city wall, coldly watching the zombie army that blotted out the sky and covered the earth below. There were probably several tens of thousands of them. Compared to the siege of Balon City, there were only a few more. We still underestimated them, Duan Yu muttered to himself. Where exactly did these things pop out from? Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but mutter. If the lips were gone, the teeth would be cold. If the human territory really was captured by the zombies, then the entire Seakong planet wouldn't be far from falling. After all, the Mo Kingdom capital was the largest defensive fortification in the north. If even the Mo Kingdom capital couldn't resist this wave of zombies, then the problem was already very serious. Other smaller places were even more unlikely to resist. Logically speaking, that shouldn't be possible. With so many undead puppets appearing out of nowhere, there has to be a place to contain them. It's impossible to appear out of thin air, right? Liang Qingqing said. There should be a large invisible underground village nearby. It should be under the Gale Forest. Mo Lien pursed her lips and said coldly. Bailey, she couldn't help but frown when he heard this. If even you guys can't immediately find out where the rat nests are, how are we going to clean up the rat nests hidden deep underground when we return? That's right. In this way, wouldn't the initiative be in their hands, and they can invade our country whenever they want? Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but say. At the side, Wei Nanshu's face had already turned pale. He hid behind Wei Nanfeng and shouted, third brother, what should we do now? We're surrounded by zombies. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come to Northern Mo to join in the fun. So scary. How could they resist so many zombies? Shut up. Wei Nanfeng coldly swept a glance at this good-for-nothing thing. This coward, his reputation as the third elder brother had been completely lost by this guy. Chapter 1508. Roar roar. Waves of roars came from the distance. These terrifying sounds ripped apart the tranquility of the Mo Kingdom capital, causing all the commoners staying at home to become uneasy and tense. Currently, the streets outside were completely under martial law, and the commoners were all chased back home and prohibited from coming out. But this didn't mean that they didn't know what was happening. The fear of the unknown made people afraid, especially when the roars that came from time to time were neither human nor beast, causing people to feel even more terrified. Xiaomi pointed at that batch of zombies below the city gate tower. Among these zombies that were bravely attacking the city, a portion of them seemed to be very intelligent as they followed those roars and walked towards the periphery of the city wall. They aren't thinking of circling around to the south gate, west gate, or east gate, right? Xiaomi asked in shock. Could it be that the zombies also had brains to think and knew how to change directions to attack the city? These things are starting to truly mature. Bailey, she said with a frown, perhaps one day they will evolve to the point where they are no different from us humans? Xiaomi instantly felt as if she had eaten a fly, feeling uncomfortable all over. It can't be. You all feel that these zombies can still think and have intelligence like us humans in the future? Everyone looked at her with a strange gaze. Does intelligence, Princess Me, this thing exist? Xiaomi glanced at them in astonishment before lightly poking Arbor's waist with her small hand. Jojo, just now, they looked at me with a strange gaze. What did they mean? They said that you don't have intelligence. Arbor translated their gaze for her and then added, they feel that you might not be any smarter than zombies. Everyone. Me? Xiaomi looked disdainfully at Bailey Shi, Wei Nanfeng, and the others. How is sister not intelligent? How is sister not smarter than zombies? Cough. Wei Nanfeng hurriedly turned his head away, pretending to discuss countermeasures with Bailey Shi, Sit-E and the others. They directly blocked out Princess Xiaomi's noisy cries. You said that aren't they very overboard? Xiaomi twisted her neck. She originally wanted to kick them, but Gong Sunlai blocked her with one hand. Princess, can we not court death? That's too much. Arbor nodded. When Xiaomi heard this, she immediately grinned and stepped forward to hold Arbor's arm. I knew you were the best. Your Highness, second young Master Do and a group of people from the Celestial Medicine Valley have arrived. Mo Lien indifferently glanced at Huifeng, who had come to report the situation, and indifferently nodded. Invite them up. At the crucial moment, the Do family's second young master and those people from the Celestial Medicine Valley could be considered reliable. Accompanying second young Master Do were eldest young Master Do Fengyan, Celestial Medicine Valley's Wenren Ningjing, Kong Rumio, and other physicians. As soon as they came up to the city gate tower, they hurriedly bowed to the Crown Prince before busily distributing mystic energy replenishing medicines to the mystic cultivators. They received a lot of favorability from the mystic cultivators. Arbor glanced at Wenren Ningjing and the others. They had fought together several times and could be considered old acquaintances. Your Highness, Dojo Master Ho Ping of Jushin Martial Arts Dojo has brought a dozen mystic cultivators and more than 20 body cultivators to help. Your Highness, the people from the Duan clan have arrived. Your Highness, the people from the Talisman Patrician family have also arrived. Your Highness, the Wu family and the Hong family have brought people over. At this very moment, their wills were as strong as an impregnable fortress. Chapter 1509. Everyone was well aware that if the Mo Kingdom base fell, the entire Sikong planet would inevitably collapse along with it. In the face of the greater good, all disputes and struggles could be temporarily set aside. Right now, they were faced with a major problem that concerned the survival of all humans on Sikong planet. At this very moment, Mo Lien had mobilized all of the capital's reserve forces, tens of thousands of mystic cultivators, tens of thousands of body cultivators, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers guarding the city, and were converging in batches from all directions. She had mobilized troops and dispatched generals in practically half a day. This kind of power was both shocking and apprehensive. The restless Eastern Ing Kingdom's third crown prince, Ing Fa, immediately shut his mouth. He didn't know how to describe his current feelings. He felt that when he returned, he would sternly warn his foolish and muddle-headed father, "Don't ever try to come out of the small island." It wasn't without reason that Northern Moi had beaten them into an isolated island. Northern Moi was so powerful that even countries like Northern Wei and Southern Bailey had always been on good terms with it and never dared to offend it, let alone their tiny place. It was pretty good for the Eastern Ing Kingdom to stay on the small island. At least, their home country was still there. If they rashly came out of the island and wanted to counterattack the Mo Kingdom, then they might be swallowed whole within minutes without leaving a trace of their bones. Reorganize all the mystic cultivators. Go up the city gate tower in groups of 500 and rotate every hour. The rest of the people are to wait for orders and rest. Recover as soon as possible. Mo Lien gave her first order. Huifeng immediately led his men down to do the job. Everyone, pay attention. Don't let the zombie army below move to the east and west gates. Just guard this place. This kind of once and for all solution was much more comfortable than running around the east and west gates. They only needed to keep a close eye on the north gate. Were the zombies trying to disperse their forces? That would depend on whether Prince Mo cooperated or not. Something's flying over from the sky. Archers, pay attention. Prepare to fire. Mo Lien reached out and swiped, forming the image of a fiery red bow and arrow in the air. Blazing fiery red flames tightly enveloped the bow. A shadowy arrow of fire was knocked on the large bow. Everyone only saw him squint his eyes and aim his bow and arrow at the sky. When a large group of cadaveric cranes and cadaveric crows flew over, the leader was actually a human-shaped cadaveric hag with wings that were more than a meter wide. This was a zombie that had completely evolved to the intermediate level. The wings on its back were no longer deformed and unable to fly. This zombie seemed to have evolved quite well. Swoosh! The arrow of fire flew through the air, heading straight for the wings of the flying corpse puppet. Everyone saw it clearly. The arrow pierced through the zombie's left wing and hit its right wing, skewering it like a piece of barbecued meat. Although the corpse puppet could not feel anything, with its wings skewered, it could not continue flying. Its entire body fell to the battlefield below, rolling on the ground. The arrow stuck in its wings made it unable to break free for a moment. Boom! It smashed into the sand, creating a 10-meter-long and several-meter-deep crater. Its fall caused the tens of thousands of corpse crows and corpse cranes behind the corpse puppet to lose their leader and fall into chaos. Fire! A sharp glint flashed in Commander Huey's eyes, and he suddenly waved his hand. The tens of thousands of soldiers on the city gate tower simultaneously released fire arrows into the sky. Boom 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 boom. Tens of thousands of arrows glided through the air. Chapter 1510. Things like corpse cranes, corpse crows, and the like continuously fell from the sky, landing on the ground with clangs of flames. The people on both sides of the city gate tower were mainly in charge of guarding and building a line of defense to prevent these zombies from having the chance to run past from the sides and take a detour around the east and west gates. Compared to their friends who were directly facing the zombie army at the main gate, the mystic cultivators on both sides were slightly more relaxed. In addition, the mystic cultivators who had been mobilized from various places were continuously replenished. After one group of people finished fighting, another group of people would immediately be replaced, and the previous group could rest for at least 4 hours. Fighting from dusk to dawn, the dismembered corpses of the zombies at the northern city gate of the Mo Kingdom capital's fortifications had practically piled up into a mountain. Arbor's eyes narrowed as she gazed at some sparkling things on the sand. Those were the crystal cores that dropped out of the zombies' heads after being killed. She could now confirm that these zombies with crystals in their heads were probably intermediate-level zombies. As for the winged zombie that Mo Lien had struck down from midair, she reckoned that it could already be considered a half-mature intermediate-level zombie. A intermediate-level zombie was probably level 2 or level 3. In her previous life, when she was about 18 years old, she saw these intermediate-level zombies with crystal cores in their heads. At that time, she still wasn't aware that these zombies that had part of the ability to think and could command in battle had actually already evolved to intermediate level. Because not long after, she was captured by Fan Xiuhe to be experimented on. Strictly speaking, her previous life's memory and cognition stopped at about elementary level 5 zombies. She was currently still in the groping stage for intermediate level zombies. Moreover, even now, she still didn't know whether those sparkling crystals in the zombies' heads were useful to them or not. She only subconsciously collected these crystal cores based on her good moral character of experiencing poverty and hardship. Let's call them crystal cores for the time being. They looked similar to the crystal cores in Mystic Beast's heads. Of course, the crystal cores in the heads of intermediate-level zombies were clearly much smaller than Mystic Beast's crystal cores. Moreover, like Mystic Beasts, not all Mystic Beasts had crystal cores in their heads. The production rate of these crystal cores in the heads of zombies was also quite low. Therefore, all the more they couldn't be wasted. "Sister, what are you doing?" Xiaomi jumped in fright and subconsciously tugged at a certain child who was leaping down from the city. But he seemed to be a little too impatient. He didn't expect that when his mind was thinking, "I have to pick up all these crystal cores," his body would start to move involuntarily. Arbor turned his head and blinked innocently at Xiaomi. I didn't do anything. I just wanted to lower my head and look. Look at the scenery." Prince Mo, who was walking over quickly, couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Looking at the little fellow's guilty expression, he didn't even need to guess to know what she wanted to do. Walking to her side, Prince Mo reached out and held her restless body. He lowered his head and looked down at the city gate tower. "Don't be impatient. Once the battle is over, we'll clean up the battlefield. These will all be yours." Xiaomi, who was forcefully stuffed with dog food, was speechless. "May I ask Your Highness the Crown Prince and Your Highness the Crown Princess, what the hell are you two talking about?" Why didn't she understand? Xiao Mu coughed in all seriousness and waved her small paw. "I don't really want it either." Yes, that's right. It's your husband who must give it to you. Xiaomi, are you two still not done yet? Chapter 1511. How infuriating! Xiaomi glared at Northern Prince Mo disapprovingly. Your Highness the Crown Prince, what did you come here for? Hurry and go back. I'll take care of sis here. For some reason, when she saw their honeyed state, her heart felt very, very stifled, as if her mouth was stuffed with dog fur. Even her breathing felt a bit heavy. Why couldn't her Bailey she learn from his good brother, Prince Mo? In terms of treating his girlfriend, the second prince of the Bailey family truly couldn't compare to Prince Mo. Mo Lian looked at Xiaomi strangely. What was the meaning of this woman's can't breathe expression? Right now, the situation on the battlefield was basically under control. He came to find his wife, but she didn't like him? Wife, your friend is a bit. Prince Mo pulled Arbor to the side and was about to say a few intimate words to his little wife. However, Hui Feng swiftly floated in front of him. Your Highness. The Crown Prince glared fiercely at him. Tactless. Hui Feng glanced at the Crown Princess standing to the side and hastily coughed. Your Highness, this subordinate has disturbed you. The death row prisoners are all outside. Should we let them out now? Mo Lian curled his lips. Those familiar with him could practically sense the bloodthirst in this smile. Wait a bit, let's waste another half an hour. After saying this, he looked up at Hui Feng again. How are things over there? They're starting to make a move. The Crown Prince nodded in satisfaction. The day he had been waiting for finally arrived. On a day when the entire city was resisting zombies and all attention was focused on the northern city gate, the vassal king of Nen finally couldn't hold back anymore, right? Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince's pensive expression and curiously asked, did something happen? Nothing. While holding her small hand, Crown Prince Mo slowly walked towards the tall tower erected on top of the city gate tower. He then carried her up the tower together. How's the view here? With tens of thousands of corpse puppets, we should be able to collect a few thousand crystal cores. Arbor nodded. I just don't know what it's for. Mo Lian lowered her head to look at her, and couldn't help but laugh. So, you're only aiming for these crystal cores because you don't want to waste them? Okay. Bao Bao, you're such a thrifty daughter-in-law. Mo Lian shamelessly praised her. Arbor immediately nodded in agreement. I also think I'm very thrifty. Actually, I've tried. That crystal core can increase my medicinal efficacy. Arbor's eyes widened when she heard this. No wonder she couldn't feel the slightest energy fluctuation. That was because she wasn't a superhuman. Naturally, she couldn't feel the power within the crystal core. But Mo Lian was different. Did Mo Lian mean that the crystal in the zombie's head could increase the power of special ability users? What level has your medicinal efficacy increased to? She herself didn't have this kind of special ability, so she never knew how this ability was classified. I've probably crossed into the intermediate level. If the entire intermediate level medicinal efficacy is classified into 5 levels, I feel like I should be at the 3rd level right now. The devil grass that could paralyze my body before should already be ineffective if I get hit again. Arbor's eyes brightened. Then your resistance to poison is already very high. Chapter 1512. One must know that the devil's grass was an extremely potent neurotoxin that could paralyze a person's nerves in a short period of time, which would then affect the limbs and body, causing them to stiffen. But now, even this neurotoxin could do nothing to Mo Lian. Arbor's little head rubbed against his chest, then she suddenly reached out and gave him the small bag of crystal cores that she had collected earlier. All for you. No, you can keep them. If I need them, I will go and collect them myself. I have no use for them, I'll give them all to you. These below are all for you too. Arbor tilted her little head, then pushed the small bag into his arms. You're not allowed to refuse. Okay. Mo Lian laughed as he took the bag and put it into his inner world. He reached out and hugged her, then said softly, Jojo, do you want to see how strong my medicine is? Arbor nodded her little head repeatedly, her little face full of curiosity. Mo Lian smiled mysteriously at her, then suddenly looked up at the sky, at a corpse crane that was flying unsteadily. This corpse crane had separated itself from the group and was flying towards the east, looking like it was running for its life. It had some brains, but unfortunately, in front of Mo Lien, it had no ability to resist at all. Prince Mo raised his hand slightly, and a strong wave of spiritual energy sucked that unlucky corpse crane over. Ah! The corpse crane let out an unpleasant and hoarse cry. Before it could viciously pounce over, Mo Lien's eyes turned cold, and he directly reached out his hand. A strong medicinal fragrance spread out from his body, and his right palm was covered in a layer of white light. Very quickly, that corpse crane's body underwent a terrifying change. It turned from a half-rotten, half-bone-like corpse crane into a pile of rotten minced meat, and this process did not take more than 5 seconds. Arbor watched as this corpse crane rapidly rotted under the effects of the medicine, until it turned into a pile of rotten minced meat, mixed with the dust, and scattered at their feet. She looked up at Mo Lien in shock. However, the man's cold expression faded. He lowered his head and winked at her. Smiling, he asked, "Is your husband awesome?" Arbor nodded vigorously. This was the first time he realized that special abilities could be so powerful. No wonder Fan Xiuha, that pervert, captured 2 pharmacists later on and locked them up in a small dark room just like her, groping and studying their secrets. "Jojo, your husband is so powerful. You don't have to worry, okay?" Arbor looked at him and thought of the 17 floors of the Tower of Punishment. He nodded reluctantly, but still said, "I'm worried." Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she rubbed her little head. "Trust me, okay?" "I do." Arbor nodded. "It's good that you believe me. I'll let you watch a wonderful show later, okay?" Mo Lien lowered his head and smiled at her. "I guarantee that you won't worry about me again after you watch it. A mere Tower of Punishment is nothing to me." Arbor looked at him curiously. "What show?" At this moment, the battle below had already reached its climax. The fireballs thrown down by the catapults had already ignited rows of flames outside the northern city gate. Fireproof ditches had long been built at the city gate, so there was naturally no need to worry about the fire burning the city walls. A portion of the dismembered zombie corpses that could be seen everywhere had already been burned into piles of ashes. "Huifeng, you can release them now," Prince Mo said indifferently. Chapter 1513. Release what? Everyone watched as the several dozen people, who had lost all color in their faces from crying, were herded toward the small side door at the northern city gate. Wei Nanfeng, Bailey Shi, and the others on the city gate tower were all stunned, and they hastily descended the city gate tower. Prince Mo held Arbor's small hand and floated to the side of the northern city gate's small side door, where he was met with a pair of wolf puppy-like eyes. He looked over and shot him a contemptuous look. This wolf puppy was truly very persistent. Thankfully, his darling was a very strange little girl. ACI had been her enemy from the start, and she had never liked this person. Moreover, this hostile relationship was very difficult to change in the little girl's heart. "Prince Mo, what are you doing? Pushing these fools out, are you trying to feed the corpse puppet army?" Yas laughed mockingly. "Feed them?" Assie's words startled everyone, and they abruptly turned to look at the group of crying men and women. Most of them were in the prime of their lives, and there were also a few women among them. However, the most eye-catching one among these people was a slender woman wearing a thin red muslin dress. She should be a rather beautiful woman, but her hair was disheveled and her body was unbearably filthy, as though she had been viciously abused. "Release these baits?" Huifeng waved his hand, and soldiers immediately came forward to drag away the crying, screaming, begging, and even fainting men and women. Wei Mingli was among these people. When she discovered that her group was about to be thrown out of the city, her entire face turned pale with fright. She frantically struggled with her arms and screamed under the escort of 2 soldiers, "You can't do this to me! You can't do this to me! I'm one of the second prince's people." Wei Mingli was about to be scared silly. She never knew that a person could be so unlucky when they were down on their luck. Ever since she failed to seduce His Highness the Crown Prince, she actually went downhill. First, she was mercilessly thrown into the death row prison by the second prince. No matter how she begged him, she was still mercilessly abandoned. It was only then that Wei Mingli realized that in the eyes of the second prince, no, in the eyes of those in power, she, Wei Mingli, was nothing more than a tiny ant. She didn't even have the chance to fight against fate and say no. Her life was worse than death. She was captured and sent to the death row prison. She was such a beautiful and powerless woman. It was obvious what would happen to her. She was repeatedly humiliated and abused in that dark prison, and her cries for help were ignored. Now that she finally had the chance to see the light of day again, she never imagined that these people wanted to use them, these death row prisoners, to feed the army of corpse puppets. Wei Mingli struggled madly and shouted harshly, "Why are you pushing us out as bait?" A whip landed on her body. The jailer who had escorted them out smiled mockingly at her. "You're a group of prisoners on death row who were originally going to be executed. Do you think you still have a way out?" "No, I'm not a prisoner on death row, I'm not. I'm Wei Mingli." Wei Mingli turned her head and immediately saw Arbor, who was standing on the side with a slight frown. Without thinking, she pounced toward Arbor's side. "Little sister Xiao Qiao. Save me, save me. I'm Wei Mingli. Do you still remember me? It's me, Wei Mingli, Granny Nyo's granddaughter. Wei Mingli, Wei Mingli." It's over. Chapter 15-14. Little Sister Xiao Qiao. Save me, save me, save me. Before Wei Mingli could reach Arbor, two soldiers rushed over and forcefully pinned her arms behind her back, forcing her to kneel on the ground. "How dare you offend the crown princess? Take her away." The soldiers held their knives to Wei Mingli's neck and pulled her with brute force. "Don't pull me! Don't pull me! Ah, you bunch of bastards, scram! Scram!" Wei Mingli probably used every ounce of strength she had as she crazily pushed aside the two soldiers beside her and pounced at Arbor, toppling over. "What are you doing?" Arbor looked at this woman who abruptly rushed over in bafflement. He couldn't figure out why this person acted as if they were close friends and knew each other. How could this child still remember Wei Mingli? For a little girl who had faced blindness since young and had grown up slightly better, she could even forget AC, let alone this Wei Mingli whom she had only met once. She completely couldn't remember, okay? She wasn't the crown prince who could instantly recognize any random Tom, Dick, or Harry that she had met before. Her little brain was only so big, and she still needed to remember more useful techniques. There was really no need to remember the faces of Tom, Dick, or Harry. There was no way she would admit that she was actually just a little face blind, that the little fellow stood there in all seriousness and silently glared at Wei Mingli. After the crown prince tugged at his little hand, Arbor also took a small step back. "Take her away." Mo Lian coldly swept a glance at Wei Mingli. The latter shuddered and suddenly went on her knees as if she had gone crazy. She kowtowed loudly and said, Your Highness, please let me go. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I really, really know." Wei Mingli wept like a pear blossom with tears, looking extremely miserable and pitiful. I shouldn't have obeyed the second prince's orders and thought of ways to block your path and lure you in. It's my fault, my fault. Please be merciful and spare me this time." She was so regretful that her intestines turned green. His Highness is wise and mighty, how could he be so easily fooled? Second Prince Mo Lu had a hole in his head. He had thought of this lousy idea to trick the crown prince, but in the end he had tricked her, Wei Mingli, instead. Now, the second prince was angry that she didn't keep the secret and told the crown prince everything. He was so angry that he chased this traitor out of the second prince's residence and even threw her into prison. But what could she do? She was only a weak girl. If it was anyone else, they would have been tied up in a dungeon by a group of vicious people and tortured to extort a confession. Other than confessing properly, they would have no other choice. Actually, Wei Mingli didn't know that second Prince Mo Lu was in a much more miserable state than she was. This fellow's scheme against the crown prince failed, and after being seen through by the crown prince, he embarked on a pitiful path of self-destruction that now, The few remaining profitable businesses in his hands had all been exterminated by the Crown Prince. There was no way for him to survive. Rui Pavilion had already changed owners. Even if the second prince wanted to do something else, he probably wouldn't have the money to spare in the future. Wei Mingli also didn't know that second prince Mo Lu hated that he couldn't tear her to shreds right now. The Crown Prince didn't have much of a reaction to Wei Mingli's sobbing. On the other hand, Arbor's small face completely scrunched up, and his gaze landed firmly on Wei Mingli's face. "So you're that female scoundrel who blocked the Crown Prince's path?" Arbor's gaze instantly chilled as he sized Wei Mingli up. Chapter 15:15. Woman? Female scoundrel? When Wei Mingli heard Arbor call her that, she couldn't help but shudder in anger. However, she kept her mouth shut and didn't say anything. She didn't dare utter a single word to refute Arbor, because she knew very well that the Crown Prince's current expression was very unsightly. It was a grim expression that said he wanted to immediately push her out to feed the zombies. She really was a bit scared. Why is she among the prisoners on death row? The Crown Prince was also perplexed. He had indeed ordered for a portion of the extremely vicious prisoners on death row to be gathered and pushed out of the city gate tower as bait. However, although this woman Wei Mingli had offended him, her crime didn't warrant death. He was just curious as to why she was among the prisoners on death row. Replying to Your Highness. This woman was sent here by His Highness the Second Prince. She has been staying in the Ministry of Justice's death row prison for this period of time. One of the jailers who came along quickly and cleverly replied. There were two meanings behind his words. Mo Lu had sent her over, and Mo Lu hoped that this woman would die. They didn't act on their own and followed the Crown Prince's instructions to bring out a portion of the prisoners on death row. Unfortunately, this woman called Wei Mingli just happened to be among this group of prisoners on death row. Mo Lien frowned slightly and waved her hand. Since it's second royal brother's intention, then push her out as bait as well. When Prince Mo said this, his expression was placid without the slightest ripple. When Wei Mingli heard this, she instantly felt like the world was falling apart. She originally thought that His Highness the Crown Prince would definitely release her after learning the truth. After all, from the Crown Prince's tone, he didn't pay much attention to an insignificant minor character like her. Besides, she was just a pitiful woman. Shouldn't His Highness the Crown Prince take pity on a weak woman like her? Of course, as long as she left this wretched place and found a way out, why would she worry about not finding a chance to exact revenge in the future? She remembered every detail of how the second prince treated her. There was also the Crown Prince and this stoic-faced Crown Princess in front of her. Also, there were also those stinky men in prison. There were too many. There were truly too many people who had wronged her. She would definitely get back at them one day. But now, she actually didn't have the chance? But why? Wei Mingli struggled in terror as she glared at the Crown Prince in astonishment. Second Imperial brother wants you dead, Prince Mo reluctantly explained. Of course, I can't let my brother down. The corners of Wei Nanfeng and the others' mouths twitched. Could this brat be any more shameless? Since when did this master value his own brother so much? He had never seen or heard of such a thing before. Pull him away. Mo Lien waved her hand, and Wei Mingli suddenly acted as if she had lost her mind. She pushed a soldier to the ground with all her might and rushed to Arbor's side. You bitch, I really didn't expect that you would disregard kinship like this and incite His Highness the Crown Prince to deal with me. Arbor! ! Everyone was speechless. What did I instigate? I really want to ask you, how did I instigate the Crown Prince? From the beginning to the end, she had been standing here and watching the show. She hadn't said more than 3 sentences. How could she burn her head like this? Xiaomi couldn't help but burst into laughter. She felt that from her angle, Miss Chiao's small expression was very comical and amusing. Chapter 15:16. Also, what was with the kinship she was talking about? Seeing that Wei Mingli was lunging over, there was no need for Arbor to do anything. The Crown Prince directly sent a flying kick over without the slightest bit of protective feelings for the fairer sex and sent Wei Mingli tumbling over, landing head first on the ground with a thud. Arbor was perplexed and looked up at His Highness the Crown Prince. "She's your relative?" Everyone turned their heads away speechlessly. Prince Imo couldn't help but laugh. "She seemed to be lunging at you just now." "I don't know her." Arbor shook her head solemnly. Everyone was well aware of her temperament and rolled their eyes one after another. Especially Xiaomi. She knew her younger sister too well. How could a child who couldn't even recognize young Master ACI recognize a passerby in front of her? Wasn't that a joke? "You don't know me? You said you don't know me?" Before Arbor could finish speaking, Wei Mingli turned to look at Arbor furiously. The Crown Prince's kick just now was a bit heavy, and she couldn't get up after lying on the ground for a long time. She could only turn her head to glare at him. I said I'm Granny Nyo's granddaughter. Granny Nyo is from the same village as your mother, Wei Ziqin. What kind of relative was this? There was no way they could even reach the end of it. Arbor's originally stoic little face instantly turned incomparably sinister. There's always some baffling people coming to me to claim kinship. The Qiao family was like this previously. The Mu family of China was like this later on. This way, something in front of her was also like this. It was as if she was some cat or dog. It didn't matter if she was abandoned, but when she was happy and wanted to claim her back, she had to be deeply grateful. It was as if she had to happily acknowledge anyone who was her relative. Was that the case? Was she such a casual person? Have you asked for my opinion? Have you respected my wishes? Who do you think you are? Do I have to acknowledge you just because you say you want to claim kinship? The sudden cold anger, the icy tone, and the emotionless eyes instantly made the group of children who wanted to laugh all suppress their laughter in their hearts. The little guy seemed to be angry. Wei Nanfeng and the rest felt that it was better for them not to laugh, lest they add fuel to the fire and be ridiculed by the little thing for no reason. However, her words didn't seem to be completely targeted at Wei Mingli. It was as if she was venting all the pent-up anger in her heart at Wei Mingli. Do I have to happily acknowledge someone who I wouldn't have contacted for hundreds of years when they suddenly pop up and claim to be mine? Do we still have to serve you? Do you think there's such an easy thing in this world? Arbor's cold gaze swept over Wei Mingli. Relatives? Arbor sneered. The Kayaben family who claim to be my relatives are probably all dead in the Western Wastelands. There are also some people who claim to be my relatives. Sooner or later, they will die in my hands. What about you? What do you think as my relative? What kind of fate awaits you? Those Tom, Dick, and Harry relatives of mine don't seem to be people with long lives. There was absolute silence all around. There were so many people on the city gate tower fighting the zombies downstairs, but when their little crown princess released an extremely icy aura, everyone silently shut their mouths and even started to lower their breathing. Throw her down. Chapter 15-17. A furious rebuke exploded in everyone's ears like a sudden clap of thunder. Everyone's hearts inexplicably trembled along with it. They didn't know, it was their misconception. They kept feeling that every time the little crown princess got angry, it was as if the earth quaked and the mountains swayed, scaring everyone so much that they didn't dare to move a muscle. Wei Mingli's pupils contracted, and she hastily shrieked, "What are you doing? Let go of me. Let go. You can't treat me like this. Arbor, you slut. How can you face your mother by doing this?" Wei Mingli only felt as if she had suddenly lost all gravity as she was abruptly thrown down from the city gate tower, smashing into the battlefield. The last thing she saw was the little girl's icy gaze, which contained a trace of mockery and was looking at her without any warmth. How could there be such a ruthless little girl in this world? She had already brought up Wei Ziqin, this great Buddha. Logically speaking, on account of her mother, she wouldn't touch her, Wei Mingli, no matter what. Why would she still throw her down? How could she know that the thorn in Arbor's heart called the Divine Province's Mu clan had truly pierced her too deeply? Upon hearing the word relative, she thought of the Divine Province's Mu clan's 7th Master Mu and that repulsive old Bai. Although Old Bai was already dead, the Divine Province's Mu clan absolutely wouldn't let her off. Therefore, she needed to construct a large-scale shielding talisman array above the Mo Kingdom capital. After this talisman array was constructed, it could effectively prevent people from the 6 prefectures and 3 provinces from using special passageways and spatial transportation talisman arrays to come to the Mo Kingdom capital for at least 5 years. There were only a few fixed locations in the capital that could allow people from the 6 prefectures and 3 provinces to transport over. She had already asked Mo Lian about this. This location wasn't random, and it was normally within the capital of several large countries. In addition, in order to avoid Heavenly Law's eyes, 99% of the cultivators from the upper realm who used special passageways and spatial talisman arrays to transport over were very low-key and wouldn't cause too much of a commotion. Thus, when the time came, she only needed to draw a few more talisman arrays and hand them over to Wei Nanfeng, Bailey Shi, and the others. At least she could be at ease for 5 years. As for 5 years later, Arbor sneered in his heart. If 5 years were not enough for her to grow to the point where she could fight against the Mu family of the Divine Prefecture, then her growth was too slow. Previously, when he made a bet with 7th Master Mu and said 10 years, 7th Master Mu's eyes revealed a very incredulous look. She must have thought that it was impossible for her to catch up with the Mu family of the Divine Land within 10 years. However, the real number of years she had set for herself was 5 years. The Mu family of the Divine Prefecture, Humph, is nothing more than this. Compared to her, she had only one at the starting line. Who said that she couldn't catch up to her later? If he wanted to completely control his own fate, he had to stand above all the other forces. At that time, it would be up to her whether she wanted to recognize this family or not. No one could force her, because forcing her would be useless. It would only deepen her reaction. I don't know if you're prepared to die. Arbor turned around and walked to the edge of the gate tower with a frosty expression. Wei Nanfeng and his group inexplicably trembled their small bodies. What a scary girl. It wasn't easy being her family's relative either. And at this moment, that group of death row prisoners had already been thrown outside the city, attracting the attention of a large group of zombies in the front row. Chapter 15:18. Now was the time. Mo Lian stroked Arbor's head and instructed her to stay here before walking towards the side door first. Open the side door. Team 1's body cultivators, follow me. Yu Xiu raised his arm and shouted as he quickly followed behind the Crown Prince. The leader of the Dragon Saliva Guard, Yu Xiu, led around 500 robust body cultivators out of the side door with the Crown Prince. This team was like a sharp knife that cut straight into the middle of the zombie army. Immediately, the corpse puppet army, which had a rather large lineup, was scattered in 2 directions. The mystic cultivators on the city gate tower quickly filled in the gaps and bombarded the zombies that were scattered to the sides with mystic energy. Everyone watched excitedly as the Crown Prince led his team forward and disposed of no less than 100 zombies in a matter of minutes. His Highness the Crown Prince's strength made people feel a bit puzzled. This man who appeared gentle on the surface was like an abyss. No matter how deep you dug, he always gave people the feeling that he was bottomless. Hui Feng jumped down from the city gate tower and handed the latest news from the hidden night pavilion to Prince Mo. Your Highness, the 12th prince has already led Hui Fan and 2,000 royal guardsmen to intercept them. A cold smile surfaced on Mo Lian's lips. Suddenly, he creased his brows and looked up at the indistinct purple-crimson lightning bolts on the horizon. Heavenly Law, what's the hurry for? That's right, now was the time. The Mo Lian seal that he had suppressed for so many years was finally going to be released. An hour ago, Commandery Princess Yin had suddenly been taken out of the vassal prince's court and locked up in the woodshed. This made Commandery Princess Yin, who had been feeling very vexed these past few days, feel a deep sense of despair. She threw herself at the woodshed's door hysterically and pounded on it with all her might. She could only hear Su Zhi's intermittent cries outside the door in annoyance, but it was completely useless. At the same time, the vassal prince of Anan's court was filled with rows of men with red kerchiefs on their heads. The great king is licentious and tyrannical. The crown prince dotes on his treacherous consort. Now, he has caused the people of northern Mo to be destitute and zombies to run rampant everywhere. It's time for us to retaliate. The vassal prince of Anan, Cho Fu, commanded, Red Scarf Guards, my brave warriors. Are you afraid of death? I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. All right. The vassal prince of Anan, Cho Fu, shouted angrily. Then let's pick up our weapons for Bei Moi. For our poor people. Kill. 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 The 2,000 Red Scarf Guards were slowly nurtured by him over many years. As the saying goes, soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. Since the great king was unrighteous and gave him a withered woman to be his wife, he had no choice but to accept it. Then he naturally didn't need to talk to them about benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. Of course, the current Cho Fu completely did not remember that he had previously wholeheartedly wanted to marry Commandery Princess Yi. He could only think of the humiliation he had suffered from that woman when he had consummated his marriage with her. No, it was the crown prince who humiliated her. Because that damned woman actually called him crown prince when she was making love with him. It really dealt a blow to his self-confidence as a man. He also occasionally recalled the unfair treatment he had received on the day of his wedding, as well as how the entire vassal prince of Anan's estate had become the laughingstock of the entire Mo kingdom capital. It was all this muddle-headed great king's fault. Since that was the case, then don't blame him for being heartless and unrighteous. Chapter 1519. At this time, the northern city gate welcomed a spectacular black fire burning down the city. Everyone standing on the city gate tower had already stopped what they were doing and collectively stared dumbfoundedly at that tall man with a frivolous back below the city gate tower. This too? Wasn't this too powerful? In that split second just now, Crown Prince Mo had soared into the air, and layer after layer of black fog had floated around him. After Wei Nanfeng and the rest took a closer look, they realized that it wasn't black fog at all. It was clearly ink-colored lotus flowers revolving around him. These clusters of ink-colored lotus flowers abruptly spread out in all directions like the mark of death. Soon after, everyone heard a series of explosions that made them sick to their stomachs, coming from all directions. The black bone sword in Duan Yu's hand nearly fell to the ground. Even his Jade Heaven's 9 thunder didn't cause such destructive power, alright? Look at what this Prince Mo did. Just like a primitive destructive maniac, he towered in the air and looked down at the horde of zombies. Clusters of black flames rose from his fingers and gathered to form the lotus seal of death, instantly attacking the zombie army below. In that instant, everyone only saw the black flames crisscrossing back and forth, dancing in the air. Anything that dared to come into contact with it didn't have a good ending. Their bones were instantly roasted until they broke apart like a pile of shattered bones. This indiscriminate group attack simply stupefied everyone. Terrifying. One person's strength could actually be this strong? Duan Yu blinked and suddenly threw away his sword before charging down as well. I also want to kill these zombies to vent my anger because that person is too infuriating. Why is the difference so huge? Brother Duan Yu, don't be rash. Sidu Yi also hurriedly chased after him. After Emolien's lotus seal of death annihilated a large batch of zombies, more than half of the zombies on the battlefield had already been eliminated. After Duan Yu and Sidu Yi jumped down, they each released mystic energy and directly tore a small group of zombies into ashes. Upon seeing this, Arbor also hastily dashed down. While the others were fighting corpse puppets, she followed behind them and picked up essence crystals. Her small face was full of seriousness. These cores were all going to be given to hubby, so naturally, the more the better. After Sidu Yi chased away the zombies, he couldn't help but be amused when he turned to see the little fellow happily picking up cores. Little junior sister, what are you picking up? Why aren't you giving senior brother some? It's useless for you. Arbor threw the cores one by one into the brocade pouch and very quickly collected more than half of the pouch full of cores. Sidu Yi pursed his lips and elbowed Duan Yu. Go ask little junior sister for a few. What's the use of the cores? Xian Beast Crystal cores, at least they could be absorbed and used. Although Xian Beast Crystal cores were filled with explosive energy, at least they were still somewhat useful. The crystals in these zombies' heads are useless. As he spoke, Duan Yu purposely flipped through the heads of the zombies under him and took out 2 or 3 crystals about the size of a grain of rice before running to give them to Arbor. Sidui speechlessly rolled his eyes. This punk, Gagaga. The North City Gate's main gate was pulled up by the winch, and the entire North City Gate was gradually being opened. Hui Feng led a group of armored soldiers and rushed out into the battlefield to clean up the mess. Seeing that there weren't many zombies left, Mo Lien sent Arbor a look. Let's go. Chapter 1520. Northern Mo's Royal Palace. Under Kong Jian's signboard building. Dressed in black armor, the vassal prince of Anan, Cho Fu, coldly gazed at the youth in front of him. The youth was dressed in a purple and blue cloak and wielded a sword. He crossed his horse and blocked Cho Fu's path with a dense mass of people behind him. Everyone formed a circle and howled as they aimed their spears at the red scarf guards behind the vassal prince of Anan. Vassal prince of Anan, are you plotting a rebellion today? Aside from the frivolous look in Mo Shur's eyes, there was a bit of graveness. Your 12th Highness, let me give you a word of advice. It's not too late to withdraw now. I really don't know where Vassal Prince gets his confidence from. Mou sneered. The old Vassal Prince of Anan accompanied Ancestor Father to conquer the world, but you juniors want to completely ruin his reputation for loyalty. Unfilial descendants like you probably don't have any meaning in existing. Mou raised his sword and roared with an icy gaze. Everyone listen to my order. The Vassal Prince of Anan, Cho Fu, has brought troops into the palace with malicious intentions. He is now under the Great King's orders to kill all those who rebel on the spot. Behind him, the tide-like soldiers charged towards the red scarf guards led by the Vassal Prince of Anan. The two sides collided with each other like tidal waves, abruptly crashing into each other. At the same time, the Great King was pacing back and forth in his bedchamber. Seeing that he had already paced back and forth more than 30 times, the Empress Dowager couldn't resist roaring at her son. Sit down. Royal Mother, this son truly can't figure it out. Why would the Vassal Prince of Anan bring troops into the palace with the intention of rebelling without rhyme or reason? The Empress Dowager inwardly rolled her eyes, but she still maintained a straight face. There are many things you can't figure out. Sit down. The Vassal Prince of Anan's family had long been involved in all kinds of subtle actions. It was just that the Great King was busy with this beauty every day and reciting poems and painting with his concubines in his spare time, so he didn't have the leisure to pay attention to them. The old Great King of the Mo Kingdom lifted the corner of his robe and sat in front of his mother with an embarrassed expression. At this time, in his bedchamber, other than the Empress Dowager and Empress Zhao, He Jiaoyi, noble Lady Ying, and a few other beauties that were more important to him had been summoned by him. The imperial concubines sat there staring at each other, their faces filled with panic. From the sound of it, it seemed like there was a commotion outside. Not long after, Gong Chong trotted in with his 2 chubby little legs, panting. Great King, Empress Dowager. What's going on outside? The Great King jumped up from the stool in a hurry. Cho Fu brought 2,000 red scarf guards and barged into Kong Jianmen, but was stopped by the 12th prince. What? The Great King slapped the rack of treasures beside him and roared angrily. This disloyal, unfilial disciple dares to risk universal condemnation and come here to force the abdication? Sit down. The Empress Dowager exasperatedly berated him. This was the consequence of not properly educating him from a young age and worrying about him when he was old. At this time, the Empress Dowager was filled with regret as she fiercely glared at the Great King. The Great King sat back down on the stool with a stifled heart and used his gaze to signal Gong Chong and to quickly continue speaking. Gong Chong was a shrewd person. As soon as he received the Great King's gaze, he immediately understood and continued. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager, the Great King. No need to worry too much. Chapter 1521. The 12th prince led 2,000 royal guards to block them outside Kong Jian's gate. Chou Fu won't be able to rush in for a while, Gong Chang and hastily explained. They're already at Kong Jian's gate. The great king grumbled, this Chou Fu. Isn't he worried about bringing disaster to his family by doing such a thing? Where is the vassal king of Anan? Does the vassal king of Anan know that his son committed a grave mistake? When the Empress Dowager heard this, she wished for nothing more than to immediately go up and give her son 2 heavy kowtows without any regard for her image. Was there even a need to ask? Anyone would know that the vassal king of Anan must be in the know if he still hadn't shown up after such a major incident happened. All right. She and the late king had a heroic reputation in vain. How did she give birth to such a pig-headed, pig-brained son? Truly a pig-headed teammate. If this guy wasn't her only son, perhaps she would have long crippled him. How could he be so stupid? Seeing that his mother was glaring at him with a hateful look as if she expected better from him, the king immediately shriveled up. The great king subconsciously shifted his stool back and coughed lightly. Royal mother, for safety's sake, let's stay here and wait for the crown prince for the time being. The Empress Dowager grunted in agreement and placed her hands on her knees, not saying anything else. Rather, it was he Jowie who said somewhat anxiously, Great King, when this concubine came out, little 15th was feeling unwell and was still in the bedchamber. Could something have happened? The great king couldn't help but be startled. He then looked at the little boy in he Jowie's hand. Royal father, Royal father? Mo Shirlu sprinted toward the great king's leg and called out with a yearning expression. Royal father, Royal father? The great king lovingly picked up his youngest son. At the side, he Jowie also looked at her son with a smile, her eyes brimming with motherly radiance. Don't worry, Chou Fu was stopped by little 12th and can't enter the royal court's inner court at all. The moment the great king finished speaking, a burst of rampant laughter came from the door. Mo Lei was startled and hurriedly turned his head to look at the door. Vassal king of Anan. The great king of Mo stared in shock at this man who had suddenly appeared at the entrance of his bedchamber. There was some uncertainty in his eyes. Why are you here? The vassal king of Anan gazed coldly at the great king and suddenly raised his hand. The great king subconsciously hugged his son, Mo Shirgio, and took a step back. He Jowie, Empress Zhao, noble Lady Ying, and the other royal concubines also turned to look at the vassal king of Anan at the entrance. The old prince was dressed in black armor and had a long saber at his side. He looked just as mighty as he used to be. Just as he was about to step through the door, over 1,000 red scarf guards holding long sabers suddenly rushed in behind him. I've waited for so long, planned for so long, and finally, this day has come. The vassal king of Anan sneered at the people in the hall. Great king, do you still think that His Highness the Crown Prince will rush back to save you? The great king quickly nodded. Don't do anything rash. My prince will be back soon. The old prince sneered at him. Stop dreaming. Do you know how many zombies are congested at the northern city gate? You fatuous ruler. You also have a day like this. The great king of Mo was furious. He pointed at the vassal king of Anan and finally roared after holding it in for a long time. Impudent. Swish. The sabers in the red scarf guard's hands were uniformly pointed in the great king's direction. Chapter 1522. This scene alarmed Empress Zhao, and she subconsciously rushed forward. She abruptly grabbed the great king's wrist and dragged him back a few steps. Vassal king of Anan, you truly have guts? Where are the guards outside? The great king also bellowed. Guards? You're talking about those good-for-nothings? The vassal king of Anan narrowed his eyes in disdain. Your Highness the Crown Prince still thinks that by placing the 12th prince outside Kong Jian's gate, he can withstand my vassal king of Anan's estate's elite troops, the Red Scarf Guards? Truly naive. At this time, the Empress Dowager spoke with an unperturbed expression. She didn't shout herself hoarse like the great king and only said very calmly, all these years, the vassal king of Anan's estate secretly nurtured 5,000 Red Scarf Guards? The vassal king of Anan laughed arrogantly. How about it? The Empress Dowager also didn't expect it, right? That's not the case. The Empress Dowager shook her head and still said calmly, "We already knew that your vassal king of Anan's estate is constantly making big and small moves. There must be a conspiracy. According to your daily expenses, we can more or less speculate that you might be secretly raising private troops," the Empress Dowager said indifferently. Such a simple logic isn't hard to understand. The vassal king of Anan's expression instantly darkened. He felt that he had lost all his face after hearing the Empress Dowager's words. Empress Dowager, why argue with this humble subject again? He didn't come today to reminisce about old times with this Empress Dowager and the great king. The vassal king of Anan unsheathed the sword at his waist and walked step by step towards the terrified great king and the royal concubines. The Empress Dowager suddenly flung open her sleeve, and a long and continuous mystic energy wrapped over, instantly erecting a defensive barrier in front of everyone. The vassal king of Anan involuntarily sneered and clapped his hands twice. Two men in their early 50s, one tall and one short, walked out from behind him. They looked like mystic realm experts. Empress Dowager, don't blame this humble subject for being vicious and merciless. It's just that you're a hindrance here. If he didn't get rid of this eyesore Empress Dowager, how could he free himself to deal with that incapable ruler? The vassal king of Anan had long arranged for two mystic realm experts whose cultivations were on par with the Empress Dowagers to fight to the death. He had just captured the muddle-headed great king. As long as they had the great king in their hands, what was there to be afraid of? At that time, the Empress Dowager would naturally be captured. Immediately after that, it was that hateful northern Prince Mo's turn, as well as the culprit who had killed her daughter, the crown princess. These people should not have a good ending. However, that the vassal king of Anan's idea was pretty good. However, Prince Mo and Arbor had both arrived. Upon hearing the vassal king of Anan's disrespectful words to the Queen Dowager as soon as he entered, Arbor raised his brows and turned to look at Mo Lien, seemingly puzzled. He was in a hurry to return to the palace because such a big show was being staged in the palace today. As expected, the vassal king of Anan, this sly old fox, was good at scheming. He wanted to take down the Empress Dowager and the great king in one fell swoop while the crown prince was leading his troops to resist the zombie army. This way, he could indeed curse the Son of Heaven to order his vassals. Unfortunately, even though this plan was well thought out, it still had to be destroyed when he encountered the crown prince. At this time, the vassal king of Anan's gaze was slightly dazed, and he turned his neck stiffly to look at the smiling His Highness the Crown Prince. He kept feeling that when His Highness the Crown Prince smiled at him, there seemed to be a glint and shadow of a sword flashing past the depths of his eyes. Chapter 1523. A gloomy and eerie feeling. Terrifying. The depths of this man's eyes were ridiculously sharp. As an elderly prince who had been on the throne for a long time, he could be considered His Highness the Crown Prince's senior, yet he didn't dare to look him in the eye. The little stoic didn't have any other expression. The two of them rushed back from the city's north gate. When they passed by Kong Genmen, they also saw Little Twelfth and the vassal prince, who were engaged in a lively fight. The unscrupulous couple only took a few more glances at Twelfth before they flew away with a wave of his hand in delight. The little stoic looked back. She probably wouldn't be able to forget Little Twelfth's expression even in a year. It was a bit similar to the expression of a small animal abandoned by its owner. His pair of watery eyes were about to shed tears on the spot. Arbor shook his small head. You must be very protective of your younger brother normally. Look at what you've taught him? Weakling. Wasn't it just fighting with 2,000 red scarf guards? And he actually cried from being beaten up. He really was too weak, or Emolien. What could he say? That punk, MOU, clearly didn't cry from being beaten up by the red scarf guards. Rather, it seemed like he cried from being angered by his unscrupulous brother and sister-in-law. However, Prince Mo didn't say anything. Since everything his wife said was correct, he nodded and affirmed his wife's opinion. Younger brother is seriously too weak, don't worry. I'll take this opportunity to have royal father order younger brother to go to the military camp to train for a year and a half. That place can temper a person's character. In the future, younger brother will definitely become someone who can shoulder great responsibilities. Little Prince Mou, who was still fighting with the red scarf guards, suddenly coughed and rubbed his nose with a strange expression. Confusion. Who was it? Who was talking about him behind his back? Arbor glanced at Prince Mo and nodded. Very good. Speaking of which, our family's Xiao Sen has also grown up. How about we have him and Mou become partners? They can go to the military camp together to spend some time? It'll save them from being muddle-headed in the future. Snit. Brother-in-law can't help you. If your older sister wants to trick you, brother-in-law can only comply with your older sister's wishes. A certain Sen, who was studying in the school, suddenly felt cold. He shrunk his shoulders and heaved a sigh of relief. It must be an illusion. Seeing the young couple exchanging flirtatious glances with each other, the vassal king of Anan was infuriated and was just about to raise his hand. She then heard Prince Mo's apathetic voice say, "Vassal king of Anan, do you admit to absorbing private troops, transferring treasuries, and even dispatching private troops to secretly plunder some villages? Does it matter whether I recognize it or not?" The vassal king of Anan sneered. "It's not a big deal." Emolian nodded. Looking at his slightly raised hand, she mocked with a sneer, "Vassal king of Anan, from the moment this crown prince stepped through this door, it means that you've already lost. Do you understand?" Mo Kingdom's old great king, who was enveloped by the defensive barrier, immediately cried out in surprise and delight, "My king, hurry and apprehend this heartless and unscrupulous thing. To think that we treated him so well and have always respected him as a blood brother. In the end, he actually dared to take advantage of the zombies attacking the city to force us to abdicate. This is simply preposterous. Great king, sit down." Seeing her son jumping up and down, the great king's awe-inspiring demeanor was practically gone. The old queen dowager glared fiercely at him in dissatisfaction. The great king sat down listlessly. The vassal king of Anan sneered, "Your Highness the Crown Prince is too overconfident." Chapter 1524. Overconfident? Was that so? Mo Lien glanced at the old prince with a smile. However, the smile in this glance was mild and didn't reach the depths of his eyes. The little stoic pattered forward to the queen dowager. "Grandmother." The queen dowager hastily removed the defensive barrier and pulled her granddaughter-in-law inside. "Jojo, how's the situation outside? What about the zombie army?" "It's more or less taken care of." Arbor comforted, "Don't worry, those aren't problems." The great king couldn't help but sigh in relief when he heard this. At least those repulsive zombies didn't charge into the royal palace to wreak havoc. Otherwise, the consequences would be unthinkable. The old vassal king of Anan abruptly raised his hand with a cold expression. The two Mystic Realm experts who were on par with the Queen Dowager shot forward with a whoosh and grabbed without hesitation at the old vassal king of Anan. The two Mystic Realm experts instantly pressed down on the old prince's arms and firmly gripped the back of his neck as they kicked him to the ground. He knelt on the ground with a stupefied expression and stared straight at the little crown princess who was indifferently watching him. He bellowed in disbelief, "Cho Hu Cho Bao, you actually dare to betray your master?" The two Mystic Realm experts disdainfully swept him a glance and smiled faintly. "Old prince, the two of us were originally His Highness the Crown Prince's men. It's you who was too blind. We've been hiding by your side for as long as 10 years, but you actually didn't know, TSK. Anyone would be angered to death by these words, all right? Not to mention the proud and arrogant old prince. He simply couldn't believe his ears. 10 years? 10 years. In other words, the scheming little crown prince had dispatched these two to his side when he was 10 years old? The old prince was about to explode from anger. You! The old prince turned around and saw a group of black-armored royal guardsmen emerging from the roofs in all directions under Hui Fan's lead. Sharp leech-like arrows whizzed toward the 3,000 red scarf guards without explanation. The old prince's lungs were about to explode from anger. How could this be? How could this be? Actually, he and the vassal prince of Anan, Cho Fu, had come in two separate directions. The red scarf guards in his hands were 1,000 more than the 2,000 red scarf guards in Qiufu's hands. However, these 3,000 red scarf guards were completely surrounded and had no room to fight back. After the first volley of arrows, the second volley of dragon saliva guards emerged from the rooftops, all holding firearms in their hands. The second round of attack was even more inhumane. The old lord could only stare at the rows of soldiers outside the door who had been killed by firearms with his scarlet eyes. These red scarf guards began to panic under the 2 rounds of extermination. They became more and more like a group of ants on a hot pan. They wanted to flee in all directions, but they were caught like turtles in a jar. The great king couldn't help but feel shocked. The large square outside the king's palace had already been bathed in blood. None of the 3,000 red scarf guards were spared. He watched as the private soldiers he had single-handedly nurtured were mercilessly slaughtered by the royal guardsmen and dragon saliva guards. The old prince spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. He pointed a trembling finger at the crown prince and stammered, You demon! You actually dared to make 3,000 soldiers bleed on the spot without even blinking your eyes. What do these human lives count for in your eyes? Chapter 1525. Mo Lien suddenly laughed and gazed at the old prince with an apathetic and icy gaze. Vassal king of Anan, it's not like this is your first day knowing this crown prince. Is this your first time experiencing this crown prince's methods? You privately amassed 5,000 soldiers. In order to feed these private soldiers, you secretly dispatched people to plunder villages and killed more than 1,000 innocent people. You still have the face to talk about human lives with this crown prince? This crown prince thought you already knew the words life is worthless. The old prince plopped down on the ground and stared blankly at Prince Mo. Suddenly, he burst into maniacal laughter. You think you've won? Men, bring everyone from the vassal king of Anan's estate here. With the crown prince's command, earth-shattering cries immediately traveled over. More than 200 people from the vassal king of Anan's estate, masters, concubines, young misses, young masters, servants, were all pulled to the blood-soaked plaza. The great king, the queen dowager, the queen, and all the royal concubines followed Prince Mo out. They stood on the steps and looked at the group of people from the vassal king of Anan's estate kneeling before them. Mo Lien, you dare! The vassal king of Anan glared at the crown prince with wide eyes and tightly clenched fists. Mo Lien coldly threw down a word. Immediately, dragon saliva guard stepped forward and pulled out the old vassal king of Anan's concubine sons and daughters from the crowd before ruthlessly tossing them to the ground. Cries and screams came from the mouths of those concubine sons and daughters. None of them had their usual spoiled, willful, and lofty attitudes. At this moment, they had all become fish on the chopping board waiting to be slaughtered, struggling and thrashing. The dragon saliva guard slashed a few times, and several heads flew up, dyeing the old vassal king of Anan's eyes red. Mo Lien! The old vassal king of Anan bellowed. Schemer, this crown prince thought you were already prepared to have your entire clan exterminated. What are you crying and yelling for? Don't throw away your old vassal king of Anan's pride. Mo Lien coldly interrupted him. The crown prince gazed icily at the old vassal king of Anan as he sneered, the winner takes all, so you don't have to be unconvinced. Today I, Mo Lien, was the one who lost. How many people do you think you will let go of? When he said this, the old king swallowed the words that were originally at the tip of his tongue. Right? If it wasn't for his son's foresight and early preparations, his group would have long fallen into the hands of the old vassal king of Anan. The consequence of being held hostage would definitely be to blackmail the crown prince. At that time, it would really be hard to say what the outcome would be. Zhao Yi, who originally felt a little sorry, tightly held her son in her arms. The crown prince was right. If they had fallen into the enemy's hands today, how could they have spared her son? They would not let Mo's 16th off just because he was 3 years old. They would only kill him. If the rebellion succeeded, none of the old great king's sons and daughters would survive. Zhao Yi's gaze instantly turned icy. She sneered and said, scheming to rebel is a path of no return in the first place. Vassal king of Anan, are you still unwilling to surrender without a fight? Ha! The old vassal king of Anan laughed arrogantly and suddenly stumbled up from the ground. Good. He suddenly turned to look at the old great king of Mo kingdom. I didn't lose to you today, but to your son. Let's make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 1526. This Prince Mo was truly formidable. Back then, when he was only 10 years old, he already knew to send people to infiltrate the old prince's side. It could be imagined that the crown prince had already set a trap for the old prince at that time. He was waiting for others to walk into the trap step by step. The old vassal king of Anan instantly felt that the situation was already hopeless before he even made a move. Wasn't it a little too frightening to fight with such an opponent? It was just like when you took your first step and suddenly turned around to discover that your opponent was already 100 steps ahead of you and had long reached the end. He was just standing there leisurely watching you, waiting for you to foolishly walk into the abyss. The great King Mo gazed at the old vassal king of Anan. He wanted to ask him why he was plotting rebellion, but in the end he sighed and waved his hand. Imprison him first, then send the vassal king of Anan off with dignity. The Empress Dowager glanced at her son. Compared to this resolute grandson of hers, her son was much more soft-hearted. Although the vassal king of Anan's ancestors had rendered meritorious service to the country, the Empress Dowager couldn't tolerate him scheming against the Mo clan's power no matter what. For such a grave crime, there was no other choice but death. Perhaps the old vassal king of Anan had already thought of such an outcome before taking this step. Your Highness. The Dragon Saliva Guard Captain Yu Xiu hurriedly walked over and saluted. The great king's son led troops in from the back of Huashan Gate. He originally wanted to coordinate with the vassal prince of Anan from the inside, but he was forced to retreat by the 12th prince and fled to Grand Consort Shu's Chaoyang Palace. The great king's son charged into Chaoyang Palace and took control of over 100 people in Grand Consort's bedchamber. What? The great King Mo roared angrily. This unfilial son. This unfilial son. He actually dared to interfere? This fool, didn't he know that rashly leading troops into the palace had completely sealed off his last path of retreat? Royal Father, I request to see Royal Father. Second Prince Mo Lu's impatient voice came from afar. Mo Lu. The old great king frowned and waved away the guards blocking Mo Lu. Let him come over. Royal Father. The second prince was wearing a set of tattered armor, and behind him were more than a dozen soldiers who had fought a bloody battle and were covered in wounds. From the looks of it, His Highness seemed to have brought dozens of mansion soldiers and fought all the way here to save the emperor. His face was filled with unconcealable anxiety and panic. He hastily stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Empress Dowager, Imperial Father, Imperial Mother, are you all right? When this child received the news that the vassal king of Anan had raised an army to rebel, this child hastily led men to escort you, but we were still a step too late. This child asks for royal father's forgiveness. The old great king nodded at him with relief. I'm fine. Your grandmother and the others are fine too. Mo Lu pretended to heave a sigh of relief, then hurriedly turned to the crown prince and cupped his hands, saying, Sixth brother has done meritorious service in protecting the emperor this time. If not for you, the consequences would simply be unimaginable. Mo Lien curled his lips at him as he remarked indifferently, it's actually all thanks to 12th brother this time. He managed to obstruct the vassal prince of Anan first. That's right. Mo Lu hurriedly smiled and nodded. Who knows what eldest brother wants to do after taking control of the Rising Sun Palace? Mo Lien's eyes were filled with coldness. Detain the vassal king of Anan and these people. We might as well move to the Rising Sun Palace. At the same time, the great king's son's estate. Shu Quan ordered her personal maidservant to close the door before turning around to fish out a medicine bottle from her sleeve. She steeled herself and poured medicine into her 3 children's mouthfuls before finally drinking a mouthful herself. Chapter 1527. By the time everyone rushed to Chaeyang Palace's entrance, they saw the great king leading several dozen startled shrimp soldiers and crab generals to kidnap Grand Consort Shu out of the palace. Grand Consort Shu's face was filled with terror, and tears streamed down her face when she saw the Empress Dowager and the others. Consort Cheng, Secondary Consort Wu, and Secondary Consort Zhang followed behind Grand Consort Shu. Each of them more or less had a trace of terror on their faces. Especially Consort Cheng. When she saw the great King Mo, she hastily knelt down and pleaded in a tearful voice, "Great King, Mo Jiao was instigated by someone to do such a foolish thing. Please spare his life, Great King." The flock of orioles and swallows around Consort Cheng then started sobbing. The vassal king of Anan, who was forced to kneel at the side, couldn't help bursting into laughter when he heard this. "Consort Cheng, you're still begging them at this time? Do you think it's useful to beg like this? Today, even if this old man is on the road to the Yellow Springs, Consort Cheng and the great king can't be left out." Ha! The young crown princess blinked and supported the Empress Dowager to stand at the side. She merely watched the huge commotion and didn't utter a word or express any opinion. The vassal king of Anan's wishful thinking was pretty good. He wanted to take advantage of the time when the crown prince gathered all the soldiers and headed to the city's north gate to resist the zombie army. He wanted to take control of Mo Kingdom's royal palace and use it to blackmail the crown prince. Unfortunately, this old fellow didn't know that the crown prince had been guarding against him since he was 10 years old. Prince Mo didn't kill important ministers who had rendered meritorious service to the country. The people that Crown Prince Mo killed were only traitors who were despised by everyone and hated by everyone. This point was very clear. This was also the source of the vassal king of Anan's resentment. He didn't expect that after living for several decades, he still couldn't see through things as thoroughly as a young fellow. What was laughable was that he obediently walked into the hole that others had dug and then buried himself. This kind of ending made the old king vomit blood. "Bring them all up," Prince Mo said coldly. Cries and shouts could be heard as 400 to 500 people were pushed forward and forced to kneel on the square. The old vassal king of Anan was startled. When he turned around to take a look, he shockingly discovered that apart from the 200+ people from the vassal king of Anan's estate, the people from the great king's son's estate had also all been escorted over. "Reporting to your highness, this subordinate has brought a group of people who escaped from the great king's residence 300 miles away from the outskirts of the city." The old vassal king of Anan couldn't help but smile wryly. Just like the great king's son, before he made his move, he had already sent his concubines' daughters and sons away from the vassal king of Anan's estate in order to preserve a bit of the bloodline of the vassal king of Anan's estate. But now, half of his pitiful children had been ordered to be killed by the crown prince. The rest of them were already trembling in fear and on the verge of fainting. "Why don't I see the great king's son consort?" the crown prince asked as he scanned everyone with a sharp gaze. The great king's son, who was currently holding Consort Dowager Shu hostage, couldn't help but be startled when he heard this, and he hooted at Yushio and the others. "Were you the ones who killed my wife and children? Where did you take my wife and children?" This subordinate and the others found the princess consort and the 3 young masters and young misses in the great king's son's estate. "Impossible!" the great king's son immediately refuted. "I personally sent my wife and children onto the carriage, so how could I not know? How could they still be in the estate?" Yushio couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the hooting great king's son and waved his hand to have people move the corpses of Shu Quan and her 3 children over. Chapter 1528. When Consort Cheng saw that her 3 grandchildren's bodies had stiffened and their faces were deathly pale, she immediately fell to the ground and wailed bitterly, You killed my grandchildren. Ugh. Great king, great king." Consort Cheng scrambled to the great king's feet and tugged at the corner of his robe as she wailed miserably, "Great king, those are also your grandchildren. You're just going to watch them die for no reason and have no one to complain about the injustice you've suffered. And my daughter-in-law, such a good child, was disposed of by the crown prince's subordinates just like that. My heart is in so much pain." The great king couldn't bear it and turned to look at his son, looking like he wanted to say something but hesitated. This gaze didn't mean much to Emolian. The crown prince had known for 100 years that his father was easily swayed and unreliable, so this gaze couldn't sway him at all. However, it infuriated Arbor all of a sudden. "Shut up!" Arbor abruptly interrupted Her Highness Consort Cheng's screams and looked at her coldly, saying, "Poor Shu Quan, who was intelligent all her life, was in the same company as you fools. Who exactly killed her, doesn't Consort Cheng know in her heart? Don't you feel ashamed to be this kind of pointlessly good person in front of the great king at this time? I don't usually see you dote on this daughter-in-law that much." The young crown princess suddenly took a few steps forward, and the guards who were originally standing beside Shu Quan subconsciously retreated upon seeing this. The young crown princess squatted down and rummaged through Shu Quan's sleeves. She took out a letter and threw it to Gong Chang'an, who was standing at the side. "Read it. Read it out loud. Read it for everyone to hear." Gong Chang'an's hand that was holding the letter trembled just like that, startled by the young crown princess's imposing manner. There was complete silence. Only the smell of blood spread through the crowd's noses. Father, your daughter-in-law is small and powerless. I was unable to persuade the great king to rein in his horse at the edge of the cliff. I watched him step onto a path of no return. Your daughter-in-law's heart was filled with fear and unease. I know that I have committed a crime worthy of 10,000 deaths, and I don't dare to live in this world. Unfortunately, the 3 children are still so young, and I'm really worried about them. I have no choice but to. Everyone looked in shock at the great king's second consort Shu Quan lying beside the 3 children. According to what she said, could it be that the great king's second consort had committed suicide while hugging the children? No wonder he looked like he was poisoned. Impossible! Impossible! The great king's son, Mo Jiao, trembled all over and screamed in shock. This is impossible! I clearly saw the 4 of them get on the carriage. How could he return to the great king's mansion and write such a suicide letter? It's you. You did it. The great king's son pointed at the young crown princess and then placed the saber across old consort Shu's neck. Don't come over. If you dare to come over, I'll let her blood splatter on the spot. Archers, get ready. The crown prince's cold words not only stupefied the great king's son, but even the great king and the queen also turned to look at him. Father, don't blame your son for being ruthless. This person must be captured at any cost. Prince Mo indifferently swept a glance at the old great king and slightly raised his hand. The archers lying in ambush on the eaves instantly drew their bows and waited to shoot. When the gazes of the people from the vassal king of Anan's estate and the eldest prince's estate landed on the archers moving in an orderly fashion on the eaves, their lips trembled, and they started crying in a panic. Chapter 1529. Great King, spare my life. Great King, spare my life. Great King, we weren't aware that the vassal king of Anan would actually lead troops to plot a rebellion. That's right, that's right. This servant is only a lowly watering servant in the great king's estate. This servant is innocent, too. For a moment, all sorts of cries and shouts intertwined, interrupting the great king's arrogant shouts. The great king's son was indeed stunned by the crown prince's actions. After staring blankly for a while, he angrily rebuked in a trembling voice, You actually don't even care about Consort Dowager Shu's safety? As he spoke, he pressed his saber tightly against Consort Dowager Shu's neck, as if he wanted to confirm whether Mo Lian truly didn't care about Consort Dowager Shu anymore. He even drew out a small, bright, bloody mark on Consort Dowager Shu's neck. However, Mo Lian's gaze didn't change in the slightest. He merely sneered at the great king's son and spoke resolutely and callously. Consort Dowager was able to contribute to the Mo kingdom by putting herself in danger and cooperating with this crown prince to subdue you, this traitor, so her death was a worthy one. In the future, there will naturally be a place for her in my northern Mo royal mausoleum. Of course, royal father can also confer her the title of virtuous, and virtuous Empress Dowager. Everyone, the Empress Dowager. As expected, This grandson of hers had a venomous mouth and a venomous person. He could actually speak so bluntly in front of Consort Dowager Shu. But by then Consort Dowager Shu would already be dead, so what was the point of conferring a posthumous title? Cough. The Empress Dowager coughed lightly in a timely manner. Since Shu Quan has already committed suicide by ingesting poison and the 3 children are indeed innocent, then, at this time, Gong Chang and had also read the letter to the end. In the letter, Shu Quan said that she had no other requests and only wished to be buried in a quiet place outside the palace with the 3 children. The Empress Dowager sighed. According to the ancestral rules, people who committed suicide indeed couldn't enter the royal mausoleum. Then he would fulfill Shu Quan's wish of becoming a mother. She was also a pitiful child. She was originally so sensible, but she didn't expect that the ending would be so miserable. The Empress Dowager shook her head and then nodded. Then do as the great king's consort wishes. Find a few reliable people to do this properly. Let that child rest in peace. Yes, Empress Dowager. Gong Chang and received the order. However, Prince Mo glanced at Shu Quan's direction with a slightly strange expression before thoughtfully withdrawing his gaze and conversing with Hui Feng in a low voice. After dismissing Hui Feng, the crown prince looked up at the great king's son, losing his last bit of patience. How long do you plan to keep up this act? Brother Wang, don't you know that your acting skills are really clumsy? Old concubine Shu and the great king's son were stunned. Even Consort Cheng and the others standing behind them were stunned. If you still don't surrender without a fight, this crown prince will give the order to execute you on the spot. Prince Mo raised his hand and made a pressing motion. Upon hearing this, the great king's son shuddered. Old concubine Shu sensed the great king's hand going limp and quickly pinched his waist. They were currently fighting for their lives. Yet this pig of a teammate was actually frightened by His Highness the Crown Prince and immediately wanted to reveal her true colors. However, this small action already allowed the Crown Prince to confirm that the 2 of them were indeed on the same side. Seize them. Old concubine Shu colluded with the vassal king of Anan and the great king's son to plot against the great king. Her crime deserves 10,000 deaths. With the crown prince's command, the imperial guards swarmed toward them like a tide. Chapter 1530. Previously, because of Grand Concubine Shu, the soldiers were somewhat restrained. Now that they had captured Grand Concubine Shu as well, they naturally didn't need to care about their lives. Mo Jiao was personally subdued by Hui Feng and kicked to the ground. He raised his head and shouted at the crown prince, Mo Lien, you greedy bastard, quickly let me go. I'm royal father's eldest son. You can't treat me like this. Who do you think you are? Mo Lien, everyone knows that you were merely adopted by the queen. You're not royal father's biological son at all. I'm royal father's biological eldest son. Shut up. The great king roared furiously. He hated hearing such words the most. After so many years, he had watched the little crown prince grow from a cute ball-sized child to such an outstanding youth. This was his biological son. No one could part with this father-son kinship between them. All of these people, including those bastards from the Divine Province's elder courtyard, all of them wanted to snatch his son. They were simply shameless. Second Prince Imolu's eyes flashed. He immediately stepped forward with his sword and chopped at the great king's head. Mo Jiao, you colluded with outsiders to force the emperor to abdicate and rebel, and now you dare to slander His Highness the Crown Prince. The facts are irrefutable. Do you still want to deny it? Today, let me clean up the household on royal father's behalf. Ding! A streak of mystic energy swiftly bounced off the second prince's sword, causing it to deviate. Thus, the sword that was originally aimed at the great king's head chopped down on his shoulder. The great king's son roared and tried to get up, but several soldiers held his arms down tightly. He couldn't move no matter how hard he struggled. Second royal brother, you're quite impatient. Mo Lien's eyes were gloomy. She looked at the slightly embarrassed second prince and sneered, in any case, brother great king is our eldest brother. Even if we want to punish him, grandmother, royal father, and royal mother are present. It's not up to us brothers to do it. The second prince immediately smiled awkwardly. He nodded respectfully and retreated a few steps. The crown prince is right. It was I, royal brother, who overstepped. As he spoke, the 12th prince walked over in high spirits while escorting the vassal prince and the defeated soldiers in a purple and blue cloak with holes. When the old vassal king of Anen saw his son limping, he immediately wanted to pounce on him. He roared, "Fu your father! Cho Chow's Cho Cho Fu's son." He Chow's son staggered and Cho kneeled. When the old vassal king of Anen saw his son like this, tears involuntarily streamed down his face. He felt like a hero who had fallen from grace and was bullied by a dog. Royal father to royal father and royal mother. Grandmother, the 12th prince is back. The 12th prince immediately ran to his mother and grandmother to act cute at the queen test to Cho is. He chows and Cho. The king. The queen dowager couldn't help but sigh softly when she recalled what the crown prince said when he came to the longevity palace. Even if she was reluctant, the child had grown up, and the little northern moi couldn't keep him. Fu. Princess Anam Wu Hongma was in tears. She was restrained by the soldiers and couldn't move to her son's side. She could only look on helplessly as her Cho was trampled on the ground. She couldn't suppress the hatred in her heart, and she glared at Prince Mo. Chapter 1531. Since everyone is here, then let royal father speak. Prince Mo turned around and pulled the young crown princess to stand beside the great king of Mo, hinting with his eyes. Royal father? The great king of Mo took a deep breath and hesitated for a moment before saying, "The vassal king of Nan has colluded with the great king's son, consort dowager Shu, and the Shu family to plot a rebellion. All of them are to be sent to the Supreme Court as prisoners. We will decide how to deal with them after discussing this with the Empress Dowager." Waves of weeping shook heaven and earth. Regardless of whether it was the servants picking vegetables or sprinkling water in the vassal king of Anan's estate or the great king's estate, they were all sent to the prison because they were implicated. Wu Hongma cursed loudly and almost fell to the ground after being shoved by someone. She turned around, wanting to see the crown prince and crown princess clearly. However, the crowd was too turbulent, and those two were standing high above, so how could a prisoner like her see them clearly? Her heart tightened, and tears uncontrollably welled up in her heart. She didn't expect that her and the old king's lifetime of planning would be completely ruined overnight. Should she blame herself for being incompetent, or should she blame the enemy for being too strong? Wu Hongma couldn't say for sure, but she felt sorry for her son. Soon, the several hundred people were all escorted away, and the farce of forcing the emperor to abdicate officially came to an end. The Empress Dowager looked a bit tired after being disturbed for so long, so Arbor supported her back to the longevity palace to rest. When the crown prince saw that his little wife had abandoned him to show filial piety to her grandmother, he immediately followed without another word. However, before leaving, he glanced at the old great king and said, "Royal father, you must not be soft-hearted to prevent a comeback." The old great king was silent for a long time. This matter was already very clear. The vassal king of Anin had probably given the great king some sort of guarantee, which was why the great king took such a risk and made such a bad move out of desperation. Old consort Shu and the Shu family were clearly standing on the side of the great king's son. They colluded with the vassal king of Anan's estate and played a pivotal role in this laughable rebellion. The old great king had been in an important position for a long time. He was just a little confused, but he wasn't really stupid. After understanding this, he sighed and left with Empress Zhao. It wasn't that he didn't understand his son's intentions, but he couldn't bear to order his eldest son to be executed by his own hands. Great King, Your Majesty! Concubine Cheng was half lying on the ground. She was so scared that her whole body was trembling. Great King, please show mercy. Great King, please show mercy and spare Mo Jiao. Mo Jiao is your son, the Great King, the Great King. Shut up. Empress Zhao paused and turned to look at her coldly. This unfilial son colluded with outsiders to plot a rebellion. Before he did this, Did he ever think that the great king was his biological father? Consort Cheng, the great king and the Empress Dowager dismissed the matter of you instigating your son to covet the ink bamboo shoots with a smile. Who would have thought that you would go from bad to worse and actually want to plot a rebellion? What? Her Majesty the Queen had already reported the matter of the ink bamboo shoots to the Empress Dowager, but the Empress Dowager didn't order us to be punished? What Empress Dowager and the great king meant was to let us off. Consort Cheng's eyes widened in astonishment. At this moment, regret welled up in her heart, and her heartache was almost indescribable. It was precisely because this matter was exposed that they hardened their hearts and ultimately agreed to the vassal king of Nan to step onto this path of rebellion with him. After all, the ink bamboo shoots were the best in the world, and only a small amount had ever been supplied to the royal family. Now that the great king's son had diverted it to raise his private army, how could the great king and the Empress Dowager let them off? Chapter 1532. She didn't expect that the great king and the Empress Dowager didn't want to bicker with her and her son. Consort Chung covered her face and wept bitterly. She didn't expect anything. She should have thought of it long ago, right? The Empress Dowager and the great king had always been benevolent people. If they hadn't committed the great crime of rebellion, they simply wouldn't have killed her and her son. It was already useless to regret now. Her stupidity harmed herself, her son, and even everyone in the great king's estate. If she had listened to Shu Chuan's advice back then and also persuaded the great king's son to set aside the struggle for fame and fortune, then wouldn't everything be different now? Consort Cheng knew but didn't report it, so she's even more guilty. Guards, lock Consort Cheng up in the Supreme Court and await her punishment. After saying this, Empress Zhao supported the great king and left first. The 12th prince was instantly dumbfounded. They had all left. Could it be that so many things had been left behind in this matter? Had been thrown to him? Why was his life so hard? He had to follow behind a group of people all day long and clean up their messes? Granddaughter-in-law, is grandmother getting old? The Empress Dowager suddenly lamented after walking for a while holding the young crown princess's hand. The young crown princess shook her head. Not old. The Empress Dowager couldn't help but turn around and smile at her. You silly child who doesn't age? Grandmother is someone who wants to break through to the spiritual realm or even higher. She has a long lifespan, so she naturally won't age, the young crown princess said with a wink. On the side, Feng Gu couldn't help but laugh. Precisely. Your Majesty, the crown princess is extremely right. The Empress Dowager couldn't help but burst into laughter. You only know how to amuse grandmother. With grandmother's aptitude, reaching level 14 phenomenal success in this lifetime is already considered her limit. As soon as the Empress Dowager finished speaking, the young crown princess reached out and stuffed a talisman into her hands. Grandmother, there are 10 sets of mystic guiding talisman arrays in this storage talisman, which I gave to you. There are also many pills that I have labeled with their effects and usage methods. Grandmother, you can take a look at them before you consume them. After grandmother stabilizes her realm, she can take the level 14 mystic breakthrough pill. Who knows, maybe she will break through. Oh, didn't you say that the Yushio Villa is rich in profound energy? Then let's go to the Yushio Villa and go into seclusion. The Empress Dowager looked at her little granddaughter-in-law in confusion. She subconsciously dripped her blood to open the talisman under the guidance of the little crown princess. Then she turned to the little crown princess in confusion. Granddaughter-in-law, you? The talisman arrays and elixirs here were simply an eye-opener for her. Could it be that the little granddaughter-in-law had given her all the pills that she had refined in her spare time? That's too much, child. You have to leave some for yourself. Refining pills was very time-consuming. His granddaughter-in-law had to cultivate and refine pills at the same time. Where would she find the time to refine so many pills? This was probably all she had to give him. Not much. I still have a lot for myself. Grandmother, I might have to leave for a while. The little crown princess supported the Empress Dowager's hand as they walked toward the Longevity Palace. You have to take good care of your body. When I return, if I see that grandmother has grown an extra strand of white hair, I will pluck it out for you. Fenggu burst into laughter and repeatedly nodded as she said, Crown Princess, don't worry. This servant will definitely look after Her Majesty the Empress Dowager and won't allow her to grow an extra strand of white hair. You child? The Empress Dowager glanced at Arbor with a gratified smile. Don't be fooled by this child's stoic face and icy demeanor toward others all day long. Her heart was very soft. Chapter 1533. Bang bang bang. Inside a remote woodshed in the vassal king of Anand's estate, after someone knocked away a protruding stone slab, a figure covered in grime abruptly rolled out from within. Cough, cough, cough. Commandery Princess Ij and flicked the dust in front of her with all her might as she coughed uncomfortably several times. She then turned to look at the sobbing Su. Cough, cough, cough. Commandery Princess. Su hastily stepped forward to support Yi. She exclaimed, Commandery Princess, are you all right? Are you hurt? Are you hurt? I'm not hurt. Commandery Princess Eden angrily flicked away Su-er's hands as she declared angrily, simply outrageous. This damned Cho-fu actually dared to imprison this Commandery Princess in that kind of woodshed for a day and a night. I'm not done with him. In the middle of the night, that woodshed suddenly collapsed for some reason, burying Ian for most of the night. It was only now that she finally crawled out from the pile of wood with great difficulty. This was simply an extraordinary humiliation. A dignified Commandery Princess was actually buried in the woodshed for a night. Abominable, abominable, abominable. Cho-fu, this damn man, not only did he have a bad character, but he also didn't even have the basic respect for his wife anymore. Just thinking about it made her furious. Ian angrily waved away the dust that drifted in front of her as she led Su-er toward the forecourt. Commandery Princess, we had better pack up and escape quickly. Escape for what? Could it be that I, the dignified Commandery Princess Ian, would be afraid of the vassal prince of Anan? Ian rebuked angrily. No, Commandery Princess, right now, the vassal king of Anan's estate. Ian didn't have time to listen to Su-jer's words as she arrived at the forecourt in a huff. Only then did she discover that the estate was empty. What's going on? Commandery Princess Ian and looked at Su-er in confusion. Where did everyone in this household go? A lot of people came last night and took away everyone in the vassal king of Anan's estate. Su-er explained while wiping her tears. This servant also doesn't know what happened. This servant didn't even dare to run to the front to take a look. I only heard a huge commotion while hiding in the corner. Ian had been locked up in a remote woodshed by Cho-fu, so she was unaware that she had avoided a calamity. As for Su-er, it really was all thanks to Commandery Princess Yi. After she discovered that something was amiss while hiding at the base of the wall, she quickly ran over to the woodshed to hide. Fortunately, the woodshed was very remote. The soldiers who passed by only took a few glances and left immediately after discovering that it was a woodshed. Last night, the soldiers had focused their search on their master's backyard. They had practically dug up every brick and tile, and no one knew what they were looking for. Ian was suspicious as she glanced at Su-er and suggested, how about you secretly go out and ask around? I will wait for you here. Su-er could only nod her head. As Ian sat in the quiet courtyard by herself, small goosebumps actually appeared on her small arms. She kept feeling the gloomy wind around her. Even sitting in the main hall made her feel uncomfortable. Furthermore, she lowered her head and looked at the small wound next to her navel. It had already been 3 days, but the wound still hadn't stopped bleeding. This made Ian feel like she had seen a ghost, and she started to feel anxious. After a few minutes, Su-er ran back in a fluster and said, Commandery Princess, let's quickly pack up some valuables. We really have to escape. What exactly happened? When Ian saw her ghastly pale complexion, looking like she was about to faint, a bad premonition surfaced in her heart. Chapter 1534. After she came out, Even her reliable personal maid, Ming Qian, had disappeared. It could be seen that something big must have happened at home. Commandery Princess, royal notices have been posted all over the streets. Last night, the vassal prince of Anan and vassal prince Chou Fu colluded with the Shu family and the great king's son in an attempt to rebel and force the abdication. They had been captured by His Highness the Crown Prince and His 12th Highness, and have all been imprisoned in the Supreme Judiciary. They are not to be visited without a royal edict. Commandery Princess Ying An's eyes bulged. What? Then what about me? The maid Su burst into tears. Miss, you and I have both been put on the wanted list. Our arrest notices are all over the streets, saying that we, master and servant, have absconded in fear of punishment, adding to our crimes. If we resist during the arrest process, we will be killed without mercy. Smith. Commandery Princess Ying's legs gave out, and she fell heavily onto the stool. She shook her head repeatedly and said, No, Her Majesty the Queen Dowager wouldn't be so heartless. She definitely doesn't know about this matter. I want to enter the palace. I want to see the Queen Dowager. I want to see the Queen Dowager and tell her that I was completely unaware of this matter at the vassal king of Anan's estate. Commandery Princess, don't be silly. How could Her Majesty the Queen Dowager not know about these wanted posters being posted all over the streets? If she wanted to help you, she would have already had the wanted posters removed, right? Commandery Princess and slapped the table beside her forcefully. I am only a newlywed who has just married into the vassal king of Anan's estate for a few days. Why should I shoulder this blame? Why? Su Jie said while wiping her tears, Miss, now is not the time to talk about this. Let's quickly return to our room and see if there's anything we can pack up. We will leave quickly after packing up. We can't stay in the Mo Kingdom capital any longer. We have to escape far away. No, I won't escape. Commandery Princess Ying declared furiously, I want to enter the palace. I want to see the Queen Dowager. I have to explain this matter to her clearly. I have been by the Queen Dowager's side for so many years. The Queen Dowager knows my character the best. Why should I be buried with those idiots from the vassal king of Anan's estate like a stray? I want to divorce the vassal prince of Anan. I have nothing to do with him at all. Su was both anxious and irritated. Your Highness. What else could he say? Don't forget, you are the legitimate vassal prince consort of Anan. Now, even the crown prince's 18 concubines have been thrown into prison by the great king, let alone you? The principal wife of the vassal prince of Anan. Besides, how are we going to find someone to refute this? The vassal king of Anan had indeed rebelled with his son. Now, the old vassal king and the old vassal consort's family of 3 were all in prison. As soon as you show your face, not to mention refuting, you will be arrested and executed on the spot. Ian collapsed onto the stool and cried in fury, What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? God, how dare you treat me like this? From beginning to end, I never wanted to be the vassal prince consort of Anan. Why is my life so bitter? Ian was still weeping endlessly, but Su suddenly grabbed her arm and pulled her up from the stool. Let's go, Your Highness. What are you crying for now? If you continue crying, there really won't be any more time. At this juncture of life and death, Ian was actually not as decisive as a little girl. The master and servant duo quickly ran back to their room, and they nearly fainted when they saw what happened. They were so infuriated that one Buddha ascended to the heavens and 2 Buddhas left their bodies. Chapter 1535. As it turned out, all of the rooms in the vassal king of Anan's estate had been swiftly ransacked, and the valuables had long been moved back to the royal storehouse. Right now, not even a single piece of clothing had been left behind for them. No wonder she kept hearing people going in and out in the middle of the night, rummaging through every master's court. So it turned out that they were searching for supplies buried underground. Looking at the room that had been ransacked, Ian couldn't resist covering her face and sobbing. This was truly intolerable. How could she continue living like this? What was she supposed to do when a delicate woman who had gotten used to living a life of luxury had to wander the pugilistic world like duckweed? She couldn't bear to live on when she thought of those terrifying days. On the side, Su Yu's eyes flickered, and she hastily pulled in towards the rear door of the vassal king's estate. "Commandery Princess, we can't stay here any longer. This place is not safe, and those people might come to search again. At that time, we really will have nowhere to run." Commandery Princess Yin wiped her tears as she caught up to Su. She lamented, "Su, we are penniless. What are we going to do in the future?" "It's fine, Commandery Princess. After we pawned our jewelry and clothes, we reckon that we can still last 3 to 4 months. At that time, this servant will find a job, and it will definitely not be a problem for us to survive," Su said with a loyal and devoted expression. Yin was gratified. She didn't expect that Su would still be willing to follow her in such dire straits. Su took out a cloth bundle from her waist and said to Yin, "Commandery Princess, let's put in the precious jewelry and bright clothes." "That's right, miss. Do you have any valuable magnetite on you? Let's exchange them for mystic currency as well. It will be easier to buy and sell things in the future. After we leave the vassal king of Anand's estate, please wait for this servant, Commandery Princess. This servant will go to the pawn shop to exchange for mystic currency before we continue." Commandery Princess Yin nodded. This was the only way now. She then took the bag of magnetite hanging from her waist and handed it to Su. She then took off the hairpins and other valuable items on her head. Now that a calamity was imminent, she could only wait for the future and plan for the long term. However, the wound next to his navel was like a hidden danger. Why didn't it heal after so many days? Commandery Princess Yin took a deep breath before sneaking out of the vassal king of Anand's estate's back door with Su. Fortunately, after such a major incident, no commoners dared to pass by the vicinity of the vassal king of Anand's estate. After all, everyone was in danger. Ordinary people were also worried. If they passed by the prince's mansion, they might be arrested as accomplices. The two of them took off their gorgeous clothes and purposely smeared some mud and dust on their white undergarments. They walked miserably toward the pawn shop stealthily. "Miss, wait for me here. I'll come out immediately after I pawn the items," Su secretly instructed. Seeing that the road was filled with patrolling soldiers, Su was worried and pulled her young miss into a small alley. She reached out to grab a tattered bamboo basket from the corner of the wall and wrapped it around Commandery Princess Yin's head. Su had the Commandery Princess squat in the corner before instructing earnestly, "Miss, you mustn't come out. I'll come back to find you immediately after exchanging mystic currency. Don't worry, these jewelry and those magnetite that you gave me can probably be exchanged for 20,000 mystic currency. It's enough for Miss to spend for a while." Chapter 1536. Su hurry up. Come back quickly, don't make me wait too long. Su nodded vigorously before sprinting toward the pawnshop's entrance. Yin couldn't help but sigh in relief when she saw her nimble movements, carefully evading a row of patrolling soldiers, and successfully entering the pawnshop. Although the days were tough, they had to go on, right? Fortunately, Su treated her loyally. As long as she survived, she would have a chance to complain to Her Majesty the Queen Dowager in the future. Presumably, that elderly lady would forgive her on account of their past relationship. After all, she wasn't the one who wanted to rebel. She was just a newlywed who had just entered the vassal king of Anand's estate, yet she was implicated by the old prince and his son for no reason. She truly was too innocent. She pondered as she waited for Su to come out of the pawnshop. However, as time passed, Commandery Princess Yin's legs were numb from squatting, but Su still hadn't returned. After less than an hour, the Commandery Princess, who was wearing a tattered bamboo basket on her head, finally sensed that something was amiss. She hastily lifted the tattered bamboo basket on her head and hid in a corner. She stealthily waited for the patrolling soldiers to pass by. Then she found an opening and hastily ran to that pawnshop across the street. However, when she entered, she saw that Su was nowhere to be seen. Yin hastily walked up and asked anxiously, "Shopkeeper, Did a delicate and pretty young lady come to pawn a bag of magnetite and gold and jade jewelry just now? Oh, you're talking about that young lady. She pawned 20,000 mystic currency and left long ago. What? As if struck by lightning, Ying An's body swayed before collapsing limply on the ground. That damn lass actually ran off with the money. The heavens were actually treating her like this. On the second floor of a tea house in the Mo Kingdom capital. She came out. Young master, that dumb woman came out of the pawn shop. Haha, she actually only discovered a clue after such a long time. She really is dumb. Cult Master Ding, who was dressed in a gorgeous long robe, lazily leaned against the window. He glanced indifferently at Commandery Princess In, who was walking on the main street in a daze, and his lips curled up into a mocking smile. This servant thought that young master really didn't want Princess to return the 20,000 profound coins. So you were waiting for it here. Bao Yan giggled and clapped her hands with a carefree expression. Previously, when young master had disguised himself as Xen Yu to get close to that Commandery Princess In, she had almost been disgusted to death. That Yin was two-faced and two-faced. She clearly wasn't of much help to the young master, yet she dared to demand an exorbitant price, asking the young master to forgive her 20,000 yuan debt. She was simply crazy. Penniless, falling from the clouds to the bottom of the mud. Quite pitiful, Cult Master Ding murmured. His fingers pinched the white jade cup, and he raised his head to drink the wine. Let's go. He stood up and brushed his sleeves. His lips curled into a cold smile. Bao Yan was right. Since it wasn't of any help to him, why should he benefit from it? Bao Yan simply did not know that her young master had transferred all of his anger from Prince Mo onto Commandery Princess Yin. That's right, that's what Cult Master Ding was thinking. This Yin didn't help him to the end. She had said that she would let him enter the palace, but before he could properly speak with darling Qiao, that damn crown prince had rushed over. It was all this Yin's fault for not arranging everything properly. If it was her fault, then it was her fault. That's why she deserved this outcome. As for that loyal and devoted maid, Cult Master Ding's gaze was meaningful. He wished her good luck. Chapter 1537. Young master, don't disguise yourself as a lowly servant girl next time. It will only bury your identity. Bao Yan nagged as she followed him down the stairs. She was very disapproving of young master's disguise in order to get close to Commandery Princess Yin. It was fine if he had pretended to be Miss Xian Yu, since Miss Xian Yu's identity was still rather noble. But this time, in order to get close to Yin, young master actually pretended to be that lowly servant girl. This really disgusted Bao Yan to death. That damn servant girl, what right did she have to dare to make young master pretend to be her? Her death was not in vain. Bao Yan's eyes flickered. 2 hours ago, that servant girl, had hastily gone out to gather information under the Commandery Princess's urging. Just as she was about to squeeze into a small alley, Cult Master Ding, who had followed her, knocked her unconscious. Cult Master Ding squatted down with a grin and personally undid Su-er's outer garment. After a series of crackling bones shuttling back and forth, Ding Yun's body suddenly became as tall as Su-er, and his appearance also became identical to Su-er's. He unhurriedly put on Su-er's outer robe, buttoned it up, and tied his hair into the same bun as Su-er's. Only then did Cult Master Ding turn around with a smile and say to Bao Yan, who had a fuming expression, "All right, go to the tea house and wait for me. I'll come over when I'm done." Young master, why go through so much trouble? We can just knock that Commandery Princess Yin unconscious and rob her of all her valuables. Bao Yan scoffed. In any case, that woman only has a very low cultivation. If we want to rob her, she can only obey obediently. What do you know? What's the point of doing this? Cult Master Ding's gaze turned cold as he gave Bao Yan a warning look. If you continue to point fingers, don't follow me anymore. Bao Yan quickly said, "Young master, I know my mistake." It was Bao Yan's slip of the tongue. Cult Master Ding creased his brows before suddenly chuckling. This is what's called fun. Look, and originally thought that she wouldn't sink in the short term by grabbing onto the last sou. Who would have expected that her personal maidservant would pack up her bag and run away? Ayaya, just think of how spectacular Ian's expression would be at that time. In the future, I will have nothing. He really didn't know what kind of wicked taste this cult master Ding had. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. Go to the tea house, I'll go meet Ian first. Young master, what should we do with this girl? Let her be. When she wakes up, she can leave on her own. He's also a poor child. After the young master left, the girl Baoyan lowered her head and glanced at Su Ye, who was lying on the ground. A trace of disgust and anger appeared at the corner of her mouth. She hurriedly ran onto the street and blocked a patrolling guard. Big brother, I saw a wanted criminal over there. Night fell. Prince Mo finished giving instructions to the 12th prince in the study. He looked at him and said, do you remember what Big Brother said? With a pitiful expression, Mo glanced at the Crown Prince and said, Big Brother, you really have to leave? The Crown Prince nodded. This matter could not be delayed any longer. He had originally wanted to hold out until he personally saw his little fellow climb the heavenly stairway, but from the looks of it now, it was clearly too late. These are the edicts of the Hidden Night Pavilion and the Dragon Saliva Guard. Keep them well. Mo Lien tossed 2 jade pendants into Mo's hand. Chapter 1538. Big brother, please reconsider. You're really not afraid that I'll squander away all the good things you've left in my hands. Mo gazed pitifully at his older brother with a mournful expression that said, Please don't go. Prince Mo couldn't help but laugh and flicked his head. Don't talk nonsense. Do you think I don't know how capable you are? Yu Xiu will lead 7 members of the Hidden Night Pavilion to escort Jojo to the middle 6 prefectures. The remaining people will be under your command from now on. Properly preserve the token and make good use of it. These resources in your hands will be your future reliance. Big brother, how about you bring me along with you? Mo continued to plead. When your cultivation reaches the 13th level and you comprehend the power of the 5 spirits, Big brother will bring you along. Really? Mo's eyes brightened. Big brother, then it's a deal. Mo Lien couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. After exhorting a few more words, she then said to him seriously, did you have any comprehension from leading the army this time? Mo nodded and said, the vassal prince of Anan is an expert at commanding troops. If it weren't for Yu Xiu and Hui Fan helping me afterward, the vassal prince might have escaped. Don't worry, big brother. You will definitely properly learn from General Shi during this trip to the barracks. Mo Lien nodded with gratification in her eyes. You will follow General Shi to the border to guard the border this time. Second young master Shi will also accompany you. Although second young master is sickly and frail, he has his own unique points in commanding troops and arranging formations. You must not be ashamed to ask for guidance, understand? Then, big brother, you will. Holding his younger brother's hand, Crown Prince Mo sat down beside the table with him. After eldest brother leaves, you have to visit royal mother frequently. You mustn't be like before, running away everywhere like a wild monkey and worrying royal mother deeply. Got it, big brother? Mo's eyes reddened, and he suddenly hugged Prince Mo. Big brother, you must remember to come back. Truly a silly child. Big brother is only leaving home for a period of time. I'll come back no matter what in 3 to 5 years. What are you crying for? A man bleeds, not tears. Her Majesty the Queen has arrived. Mo hurriedly got up and wiped the corners of her eyes. Imperial Mother must have a lot to say to you. I'll leave first. He was worried that if he continued to stay here, he would be like his mother, hugging his big brother and crying. If that happened, where would he put his little face? Mo Lien stood up to welcome her and led Queen Zhao to the small table to sit down. Empress Zhao dismissed the servants. As soon as she saw her son, her tears fell uncontrollably. Mo Lien hurriedly stepped forward and obediently knelt in front of his mother. He softly comforted her. Imperial Mother, your son will only be away from home for a period of time. It's not like I won't be coming back. Don't be sad, okay? Empress Zhao wailed, My child, Imperial Mother knew that this day would come. When your father told me this morning, I couldn't believe my ears. It turns out that the elders of the Divine Land had found you long ago. Why didn't you tell me anything? It's just a small matter. There's no need to bother me. Imperial Mother, I promise you that I'll come back in at most 5 years, at least 3 years, okay? Empress Zhao choked with sobs. My child, do you know that although you're not my biological child, I watched you grow up little by little. From Tuanzi's age, you grew up to be such an excellent young man. I've engraved my child in my bones and blood. Mother and son are connected by heart. If you leave now, you're gouging out my heart. Chapter 1539. The Crown Prince walked up to Empress Zhao on his knees and held her hand as he said softly, Mom, I promise you that no matter how many difficulties and obstacles await me in the future, I will always remember you. I will always remember that father and mother are waiting for me at home. I will definitely come back with my wife. Empress Zhao hugged her son and bawled loudly. Mom was muddle-headed. Mom didn't like your wife at the start. I always felt that she was cold and heartless and didn't even smile at her elders. How could Mom be so muddle-headed as to fancy a woman like Ian who has a Buddha's mouth but a snake's heart? It wasn't until that day at Yuting Court that Mom realized that your wife, that girl, is actually a good child even though she is cold on the outside and not good with words. What was the use of Ian's glib tongue to amuse her? When danger came, it was still that little stoic daughter-in-law of hers who saved her. The little stoic was just a person of few words. Rather than bickering, the little stoic used practical actions to express herself. This was the difference. One was gaudy and unrealistic, while the other was practical and kind-hearted. Empress Zhao was only regretting that she didn't build a good relationship with her youngest daughter-in-law from the start. Now that her daughter-in-law was about to leave, she didn't have a chance to get along well with her. She couldn't help but feel sad when she thought of this. Jojo, this child, is also leaving in a few days. Mom doesn't feel good about not being able to get along with her. Mom, don't be sad. No matter where we go, you are Jojo's and my greatest concern. Besides, Jojo won't be leaving for a few days. Mom will bring Jojo around these few days. Mom, I'm telling you, it's the easiest if you don't want to see Jojo's stoic face. You just have to tell her, daughter-in-law, since you're about to leave, just smile for Mom. She'll definitely smile. Empress Zhao glanced at her son and pointed at his forehead with a smile through her tears. You're always teasing your mom. While the mother and son were chatting, Xiaomu also made 3 consecutive promises in front of her parents. She promised to return home within 3 years, she promised to send a message back within half a year, and she also promised that she absolutely wouldn't get hurt. Wei Ziqin asked Qiao Zhongbang to open the ancestral hall, and the couple brought Arbor to Long Chun. Child, you have to keep the jade pendant that mother gave you. That's the symbol of the Mu family status. Qiao Mu pursed her lips non-committally, but she did not refute. She would never take the initiative to get in touch with the Mu family of the Divine Prefecture. These so-called relatives, Hey, mother doesn't care what you think in your heart. In short, promise mother that you must not be angry with your biological mother, okay? Mother, I'm not angry at her. Then why didn't you take the initiative to visit her these days? Wei Ziqin glanced at her daughter's stubborn side profile and suddenly reached out to pull her into her arms. Mother knows that you're upset, but mother wants you to face it, okay? Arbor nodded. Mother, what happened to Long Chuyun? Why was I implicated by her? I'll face all these and find out the truth. Mother, don't worry, those people from the Mu family can't hurt me anymore. Because before they hurt her, she would let them die. Wei Ziqin's heart trembled, and she and her husband Xiao Zhongbang looked at each other. The couple was baffled, and a bad premonition emerged in their hearts. Why did their daughter have such a murderous look when she talked about the Mu family? Was this okay? Chapter 1540. 976 Arbor didn't know if she was good or not, but she didn't have a good impression of the Mu family. How she would treat them in the future would depend on how they treated her. Moreover, she was bound to meet Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord, Gung Pengcheng, on this trip to the middle 6 prefectures. At that time, it would be clear who was the god and who was the ghost. At the end of the quiet hill, Arbor stood there with Haitang. Arbor didn't move, and her gaze fell on Haitang, who was digging the soil. After digging deeply, Haitang quickly dug out the coffin of the great king's consort. She turned to Arbor and said, "This isn't good, Crown Princess." Of course, digging a grave wasn't good, but it depended on whose grave she was digging. "Open it." Arbor glanced indifferently at Haitang. This child was a blockhead. She didn't talk much, and every time she spoke, she would be in a daze. No matter how much she disapproved of her master, she would obediently complete the task. Haitang cupped her hands 3 times at the coffin before opening it. She was very fast. With a light pat on the coffin lid, the nails on the coffin lid flew up and bounced to the side. The coffin lid opened, revealing 1 adult and 3 children. 4 pale faces were revealed. If normal people saw this, they would probably be greatly shocked and scared half to death. However, Qiao Mu's expression did not change in the slightest, without the slightest ripple. Haitang picked up a sword and was about to stab it into the coffin. Arbor couldn't help but twitch her mouth. "Stop, what are you doing?" Haitang turned to look at her blankly, her little face full of confusion. "Crown Princess, didn't you dig up the grave of the great king's consort to kill the corpses and whip them out?" "Arbor, I have no grudges with them, why would I do that?" Qiao Mu gazed at Haitang exasperatedly. "Moreover, even if you have enmity and grudges, you can just take revenge when you're still alive. Why do you have to compete with a corpse? Boring." The little crown princess naturally had her pride. As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes flashed slightly. She wondered if Inyan was doing well. The little crown princess's lips curled into a sneer. He dared to show off his culinary skills in front of her to please the queen, and even dared to insult her to her face. Naturally, he had to pay the price. He wondered if she had been feeling unwell recently after eating the pastries with added ingredients. The funniest thing was that the sumaru seed that Ijin had placed inside the jasper begonia to trick the queen dowager had been turned into medicinal powder and given to Commandery Princess Ian to eat. This kind of poisonous powder had a very strange use. Once a person's body was injured, the wound would never heal. If it wasn't detoxified within half a month, the wound would fester and spread until there was no blood left. Poison? Poison is right. Didn't they know that she would get angry if they kept coveting her men? Haitang blinked. "Then Crown Princess, why exactly are you digging up graves?" The little Crown Princess walked up and squatted down in front of the great king's consort. She pried open her lips and poured down 2 mouthfuls of the medicinal liquid. She then poked her throat with 2 fingers, and that medicinal liquid slowly trickled down. Haitang looked at her little Crown Princess in shock. She wouldn't be so bored as to ask the Crown Princess if she wanted to poison the great king's consort again. The Crown Princess wouldn't be so bored. The little Crown Princess definitely had her reasons for doing this. However, she didn't know what the Crown Princess meant by this. Cough, cough, cough. Chapter 1541. 977. Looking at the great king's princess consort who suddenly choked and coughed while struggling to sit up, Haitang was even more fearful. Even though Haitang was skilled and daring, she couldn't help but be shocked by the scene before her. Not good, the great king's princess consort has turned into a corpse. Haitang held her sword and blocked in front of the crown princess. Didn't I say it couldn't be buried? Look at how fierce it is. The moment the coffin is opened, the corpse will rise. In today's world, everyone was used to cremating corpses to prevent the corpse from mutating and coming out to harm people again. Ta crown princess. The great king's princess consort coughed and called out softly. Heavens, the great king's princess consort could actually still speak? What was going on? Could it be that the great king's princess consort wasn't dead at all? Haitang looked at the little crown princess in shock, only to see her pouring that bottle of medicinal liquid into the mouth of the 3 children. Very quickly, the 3 children also woke up one after another and timidly nestled beside Shu Quan, their faces filled with fear. Don't be afraid. Shu Quan hugged the three children and comforted them as she hurriedly got up to bow to Arbor. No need to be so courteous. Arbor waved her hand and excused Shu Quan from bowing. Hai Tang muttered at the side, Crown Princess, so the bottle of medicine you gave to the great king's princess consort that day was a fake bottle of poison. A fake. It's genuine, it's throat-sealing poison. Could a fake one deceive so many imperial physicians? The poison was naturally real, but she also had a way to bring someone back to life within 2 days. Xiao Mu swept this dull-witted fellow a glance. She was also present that day and saw her hand a bottle of poison to Shu Quan with her own eyes. At that time, this lass even asked her with a straight face why she helped Shu Quan. The little crown princess thought that this silly lass had completely understood her intentions, but she didn't expect that. Hehe. Was it really a good idea to keep such a strange child by his side? This servant thought that you didn't want the eldest prince consort and her child to suffer the pain of being imprisoned. That was why you agreed to help at the beginning and gave them a bottle of poison so that they could die quickly. After that, when she learned that the great king's son was also involved in the conspiracy, the crown princess became angrier and angrier. She immediately wanted to dig up a grave and whip the corpse to vent her anger on the great king's son. Hai Tang scratched her head. Arbor was speechless. This guy's way of thinking seemed to be different from others. Is it really a good thing for you to imagine your own master like this? That was why she was holding the sword and preparing to chop the corpse with a serious face. She really thought that her master wanted to go back on her words and whip the corpse. I didn't think that the crown princess would really save them. Hai Tang said blankly. Actually, when the great king's son's consort came to find her master that day, she didn't understand the situation at all. The two masters spoke without rhyme or reason, so she stood at the side and only watched and listened without saying anything. When she saw the crown princess give the great king's son's consort a bottle of medicine and the great king's son's consort thanked her with tears in her eyes, she imagined the plot. What was wrong with that? All right, turn around. Master didn't want to talk to a fellow like you who imagined too much. Hai Tang obediently turned around and faced Arbor with the back of her head. Master, when you leave, call this subordinate. Arbor. Did the crown prince throw such a silly person to her side just to be funny? The great king's son's consort pulled the three children up and lowered her head slightly with tears in her eyes. Thank you, crown princess, for your help. Chapter 1542. Shu Quan has nothing else to ask for in this life. Today, I will lead the three children far away from the Mo Kingdom capital and go to the mountains and countryside to spend the rest of my life there. The great king's consort held the three children and bowed toward Arbor again. Shu Quan definitely won't cause trouble for the crown princess. Please be at ease. Arbor nodded and handed her a bag of mystic currency. Take the things in the coffin with you. Take good care of the children in the future and don't return to the capital by any means. Arbor nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. He turned around and called for Hai Tang to leave together. Shu Quan tightly embraced the three children and gratefully glanced at Xiao Mu's back a few more times. She had one son and two daughters of her first wife. The oldest daughter was no more than 10 years old, and the youngest daughter was only 7 years old. They were at the age of flower buds, so she naturally couldn't let them lose their lives innocently because of the great king's consort's stupidity. Cheng, let's go. Shu Quan tugged at her 8-year-old son's arm. The boy clenched his fists and suddenly flung her hand away. He roared at Shu Quan, Mother, where are you taking us? Why do we have to run away? Don't ask too much. Shu Quan covered her son's noisy mouth and held back her tears. Child, from now on, us four mother and son will depend on each other for survival. Our days won't necessarily be worse than before. How can our days be better than before? Although Mo Cheng was young, he was very astute. Mother, everything you said before was a lie, right? Father didn't oppose at all, right? Wrong. Your father colluded with the vassal king of Anan and the Shu family to force an abdication and rebel. This is an established fact. An icy voice suddenly came from behind the tree. Royal father has already decreed that the vassal king of Anan and his vassal prince instigated a rebellion and stripped him of his title as the vassal king of Anan. As for brother great king and the entire Shu estate, all the direct descendants and collateral branches will be implicated. Although the servants can be spared the death penalty, they will be exiled to the western wilderness. These are all crimes committed by the vassal king of Anan colluding with the great king's son. The cold voice was heard clearly again. Shu Quan's entire body trembled, and she turned her head to look in horror. The crown prince was wearing an ink-colored imperial robe. He wore a fan-shaped jade pendant under a sky-blue dragon-patterned belt around his waist. His jet-black hair stood on end like a waterfall. Just by standing there, he exuded an endless pressure, making it hard for others to raise their heads and look at him directly. Shu Quan was extremely flustered. She hurriedly reached out to grab the 3 children and said to them, Quickly greet your Uncle Wang." The 2 little princesses hurriedly knelt down and saluted. However, the son of the great king's first wife, Mo Cheng, had an unyielding appearance despite his young age. He raised his head and pursed his lips, stubbornly standing with his back straight and unmoving. "I don't bow to my enemies." Shu Quan was both anxious and angry. She was anxious because her son didn't know the severity of his words. She was angry because Consort Ching raised her youngest son by her side and taught him to have such an arrogant temperament. At the juncture of life and death, he still dared to be so stupid. He was simply foolish beyond compare. "Eldest sister-in-law, you're a smart person." This woman actually knew to seek help from the crown princess early in the morning. Who would normally not interact with the crown princess much know that this little fellow was actually a cold-faced but warm-hearted person who attached great importance to her promises. Normal people would most likely beat a retreat when they saw the little crown princess' cold face. Yet Shu Quan knew to take a risk out of desperation. Chapter 1543. She had staked everything on the little fellow, and as expected, she succeeded. This wife of the great king's son was overly intelligent, which made people uneasy. This kind of person who knew how to lay low and conceal herself would ultimately be a disaster if left alive. Shu Quan had been paying attention to the crown prince's every move, and when she saw his eyes suddenly turn cold and slightly raise his hand, her heart couldn't help but beat wildly. "No, your highness. Please be magnanimous and show mercy. Let my children live." "They are innocent, your highness." "There are no innocents under the royal authority." Mo Lien coldly said, "Winners are kings and losers are bandits. The great king's brother lost, so he has to pay the price. Letting the tiger return to the mountain would only invite fire to burn oneself." He had never been a kind-hearted person, especially this 8-year-old child in front of him, whose eyes were currently leaping with flames of hatred. How could he let it go? Once the seed of hatred was buried deep in one's heart, it would eventually grow into a towering tree one day. Once it was instigated and used by someone with ulterior motives, the consequences would be unthinkable. Before he left the star field, he had to pave a smooth path for his 12th brother. Anything that could become his stumbling block, he would eliminate it without hesitation. Don't say that he was ruthless, it was just that their standpoints were different. Suddenly, Shu Quan picked up a thick tree branch from the ground, and under everyone's unexpected gazes, she ruthlessly struck at her own son. She grabbed Mo Cheng and abruptly smashed his knee a few times, until that child's left knee fractured and fainted from the pain. "Your Highness, please show mercy." Shu Quan can take these children and personally write an oath binding the heavenly law. In the future, they will definitely not become a tool for someone with ulterior motives. I will also properly teach Cheng and absolutely won't let him repeat the mistakes of his past and follow in his father's footsteps, coveting things that he shouldn't covet. Shu Quan's hair was disheveled and her entire body was soaked. She heavily knocked her head on the ground, and a bulging mystic coin pouch fell from her chest with a bang. The crown prince's gaze fell on that brocade pouch embroidered with an ugly lotus flower, and his gaze softened. Ever since the little guy learned how to embroider lotus flowers, he liked to embroider lotus flowers on his sleeves, neck, pockets, and even socks. The crown prince gazed deeply at Shu Quan, then his gaze fell on Emo Cheng's left leg without any warmth. Shu Quan was very smart. It seemed that the child's leg could not be cured in the future. As a cripple, it was naturally impossible for him to reach the top and sit on the throne. He had lost the value of being used by others, so naturally, it was impossible for him to be targeted by people with ulterior motives. Shu Quan was trying to make him feel at ease. The crown prince glanced at her indifferently and nodded. I hope you'll take care of yourself. Hui Feng led a dozen or so people behind the crown prince, and when they heard this, they couldn't help but be startled and look up at their crown prince. However, the crown prince had already turned around to leave. Hui Feng and the others exchanged glances before quickly following after him. Your Highness, are you going to let the great king's son off just like that? Emo Lien nodded with an indifferent expression. Thinking of the bulging profound coin pouch embroidered with lotus flowers, she sighed and muttered to herself, it's better not to disappoint her. If his stoic-faced darling wanted to save someone, then she would save him. But Your Highness, Emo Lien abruptly turned to glance at Hui Feng. When Emo Cheng comes of age, kill him without mercy if he makes any strange movements. Shu Quan, Shu Quan, you mustn't disappoint my darling. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead. A harsh glint flitted through the crown prince's eyes for a fleeting moment. Chapter 1544. Pa la, after a crisp sound, a perfectly good tea set was swept to the ground, turning into broken porcelain pieces. Your Highness. A person who looked like a shopkeeper stood in front of Emo Lu, trembling with fear and trepidation, and his voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. The properties under our name have been forcefully destroyed or seized by a mysterious force one after another. Now, we don't have much income every day. If this continues, I'm afraid that we won't last half a month before. We won't be able to make ends meet. Despicable. Emo Lu slapped the table and cursed, if I find out who's doing this behind our backs, I definitely won't let them off. You really don't know who's targeting you? A cold and desolate voice immediately drifted in from outside the window. Emo Lu's entire body stiffened. This voice was like a nightmare, so he naturally couldn't forget it. Emo Lu retracted the horrified expression on his face and hastily greeted with a smile. Emo Lu didn't know that Your Highness the Crown Prince was gracing us with his presence. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you. Prince Emo stepped into the study with a smile and shot a glance at the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper immediately sensibly retreated several steps and bowed in salute. Your Highness the Crown Prince, second prince, this humble one will take his leave first. The second prince only felt his back drenched in cold sweat. How could he be in the mood to pay attention to a shopkeeper's words? After nodding absent-mindedly, the shopkeeper also felt his entire body abruptly turn cold, and he hastily jogged out the door. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief, as if he had escaped from the gates of hell. Take it for second royal brother to look over, the crown prince said coldly. Hui Feng quickly stepped forward and unfolded an oath, flattening it before placing it in front of Emo Lu. When Emo Lu saw it, he couldn't help but tremble in anger. Crown Prince, what do you mean by this? Second royal brother doesn't even understand this? This oath clearly stated that Emo Lu must not covet Northern Mo's right to inherit the throne for the rest of his life and was willing to be an idle prince. I'm doing this for royal brother's sake. Emo Lien said indifferently, rather than having unrealistic thoughts like brother great king, why don't this crown prince give it to you and completely sever this thought, ensuring your safety for the rest of your life? You. Emo Lu's face twisted as he laughed awkwardly. Crown Prince, you must be joking. Emo Lu has never had such disrespectful thoughts. Northern Emo naturally only has one crown prince, and that is you. Emo Lien coldly glanced at him. I made a deal with the Rakshasa Ghost Sex Sect Master. The one who wants to buy this prince's life is actually you, right? Emo Lu immediately broke out in a cold sweat like a waterfall. He really didn't expect the crown prince to be so blunt. When this crown prince was trapped in Balon City and was tragically attacked by tens of thousands of corpses, brother great king, that fool, jumped out first, causing royal father to mistakenly believe that he was the one who did it. Actually, second imperial brother is the one who hides the deepest. Mo Lien smiled at him and said, otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to secretly nurture Wei something Li for so long just to have her hide by my side. Teske, you're so shrewd that it makes me shudder. This crown prince has the evidence of you bribing the Rakshasa ghost sect to assassinate me. The crown prince's expression was indifferent as his gaze landed on that piece of paper. See if you want to sign this oath. If you sign it, the grudges between us will be written off. And if you don't sign it? The crown prince curled his lips. Chapter 1545. At this time tomorrow, the great king will have a complete set of evidence of second royal brother hiring someone to murder younger brother in front of him. Second Prince Mo Lu's entire body trembled, and he hastily stepped forward to pick up his brush. With a swish, he signed his name on the oath and stamped his blood seal. Very good. The crown prince nodded and took the oath to put it away. He coldly glanced at Mo Lu. After this, 12th brother will go to the military camp to gain experience for a while. I hope that you will think carefully before you make any moves. The so-called restrictions of heavenly law aren't just empty words to scare people. Even this crown prince can't do anything about heavenly law, let alone ants like you. After saying this, the crown prince led Hui Feng out of second Prince Mo Lu's study without looking back. When he stepped out of the door, his footsteps paused, but he didn't turn back. He merely coldly said, I'm letting you off for royal father's sake. You should be thankful that you have a loving father. Prince Mo coldly tossed this sentence before walking out the door. The old great king was already pitiful enough after sending away his eldest son. If he also lost his second son, his body probably wouldn't be able to bear it. He was purely thinking for royal father. Otherwise, Mo Lien stepped out of the second prince's study and looked up at the horizon. She sighed softly in her heart. It's time to bid farewell to Jojo. Inside the main hall of the Marquis of Jiyuan's estate, Qiao Zhongbang glared at his youngest daughter, Qiao Lin, who was dressed in men's clothing and energetically jumped out. He fumed with rage and glared at her. What are you doing? Hurry and change out of these nondescript clothes you're wearing. Father, I already told sister. Starting tomorrow, I'll go to the military camp with younger brother to gain experience. If I want to embark on the path of the strong, I must learn to be independent and strong. Of course, the most important thing is still to take care of Xiao Senior. Qiao Sen changed into a spirited riding outfit and made a face at Qiao Lin. It's not certain who's going to take care of who. The little monk bit on a small handkerchief and looked pitifully at Arbor as he sniffled. Arbor hugged little Baldy and comforted him. Hey, before the old monk left, he told me that he would come back to pick you up in 3 years. After the new year, let's count it as 1 year. Now, there are only 2 years left. The old monk will definitely come to find you. The little monk was sobbing. Arbor looked down at him and touched his little bald head. Don't cry. I promise you that I'll be back within 3 years. The journey to the 6 prefectures continent will be difficult and dangerous. I can't bring you along. You stay at home, study hard, and cultivate diligently. I guarantee that you will see me soon. The little monk sobbed for a while and nodded his head pitifully. Wei Zichin's eyes also reddened. All the children had to leave home. Xiaosen was still so young, and Xiao Lin was just a child. She didn't know if they could take good care of themselves. Mother, a baby eagle must spread its wings and fly high in order to grow into a male eagle in the future. Don't worry, I'll take good care of younger brother along the way. The crown prince heard this the moment he entered the room. He looked at Xiao Lin's youthful attire and couldn't help but smile. Mother, you really don't have to worry. Although Xiao Sen is going to the military camp to gain experience, I've arranged for people to take care of him along the way. And he'll be accompanying you, on this trip? The crown prince glanced at Xiao Lin halfway through his sentence. Xiao Lin, have you really decided? Broken dreams. Chapter 1546. It wasn't a joke for women to enter the military camp, and there were many inconveniences involved. Of course, Shaolin-er's abilities naturally weren't weak. At the age of 11 or 12, she was about to break through to become a level 8 mystic cultivator. These two sisters were both monstrous figures. Xiaolin raised her small head. Brother-in-law, brother-in-law. Sister has already agreed. Darling Xiao had already agreed, so the Crown Prince naturally had no objections. The Crown Prince summoned Huifeng and had him give the oath to Mo Shi for safekeeping. After exchanging a few words with Qiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, and the others, they had dinner before bidding farewell to everyone and returning to the palace. The entire journey, the little fellow sat in the carriage sullenly and didn't utter a word. When the Crown Prince saw this, he couldn't help but chuckle as he reached out to rub her head. Didn't we agree? Jojo can't not be happy. I'll definitely go to Shuntian Prefecture to find you within 5 months. I won't go back on my word. Arbor nudged to his side and tilted her head to glance at him. You're leaving today? The Crown Prince nodded. Right away. Then you won't be able to watch me climb the celestial stairway. Unhappy? Normally, when this person appeared in front of her all day long, she truly didn't think much of it. But now, knowing that he was about to leave, she didn't feel good in her heart. It was as if she was empty, as if something was missing. She just wasn't happy. The Crown Prince reached out to tuck a strand of hair from her forehead behind her head. He cupped her small face and leaned close to her, gently and slowly planting a kiss on her lips. Jojo, take good care of yourself. Let me be at ease, okay? Arbor snuggled into his embrace and reached out to hug his waist with a pair of small paws. You also have to promise me to stay away from danger. You can't let yourself get hurt, and you can't take risks to save time. Upon hearing this, Emolian nodded and simply reached out to carry her onto his lap. Wrapping his arms around her body, he rested his head next to her neck and rubbed it. He sighed softly and said, What to do, what to do. I haven't left yet, but I already miss you so much. How about, you put me in a storage talisman and bring me along? Darling Xiaolin's eyes lit up as she turned to look at him. Prince Mo glanced at the little fellow's serious expression and couldn't help but chuckle. This little thing had an expression that said, You can put me in your pocket and take me away. It was so cute. I can't hide it from the Heavenly Tao. If the Heavenly Tao finds out that I brought a helper, do you think it will punish me even more severely? Liar. Arbor puffed up his cheeks and glanced at him. You just won't take me. The Crown Prince hugged her helplessly and comforted her gently, and I don't want to bring you there. There are too many unknowns. I can't risk you. I can't bear to, the Crown Prince murmured, his arms tightening. Jojo, you have to be good. The carriage entered the Eastern Palace, and the two got off hand in hand. Taking advantage of the moonlight, they strolled slowly on the colorful stone path. The two of them held hands, their shadows entwined under the moonlight. After strolling around the Eastern Palace's little garden, Miss Qiao did not feel like resting and asked him to accompany her for another 2 rounds. Are you tired? How about I carry you on my back? Arbor thought it was a good idea. Lying on top of him, she nuzzled her head next to his neck and said in a muffled voice, Hubby, let's not leave today, okay? Okay, we'll leave tomorrow morning. I'll stay with you tonight. Mo Lien softly responded, If you're tired, then sleep. No. If she woke up, this person would not be by her side. Chapter 1547. Arbor snuggled against his neck and exhaled. What if you don't come to Shuntian Manor on time to find me? I won't. Mo Lien looked certain as she tilted her head slightly to look at him. I keep my promises to you. I said if. The little fellow persisted. If you don't come out on time, then I'll go to the Tower of Punishment to find you. Mo Lien nodded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. But then you and Rotten Peach Blossom have to work hard together. Strive to be released early and come out to see me together. Arbor gave a small yawn and wrapped her arms around his slender neck. She muttered to herself, I miss you too, Lien. He hasn't left yet, but she's already thinking about him. Mo Lien turned to look at the little fellow on her shoulder. She smiled warmly and raised her hand to rub the back of the little fellow's head. That night, the crown prince didn't sleep at all, staring blankly at the little girl in his arms. It wasn't until dawn that he absent-mindedly regained his senses and looked at the white horizon as the sun slowly rose. He stuffed something into her palm and kissed her forehead. Only then did he release her hand and leave the room. He walked alone to a door that descended from the sky. Before entering the door, he turned to look deeply at the tightly shut door and secretly said in his heart, "Jojo, wait for me." He followed the door and suddenly disappeared from heaven and earth. Arbor seemed to have sensed something and suddenly opened her eyes. She subconsciously grabbed something in her hand and lowered her head. It turned out to be a palm-sized jade sculpture that was carved very vividly. A pair of beautiful phoenix eyes seemed to sparkle, blinking under the morning light. The little fellow frowned and her little face scrunched up. Holding the small sculpture in her hand, she didn't even bother to put on her outer robe and quickly rushed out the door. It was quiet outside the door and that fellow's figure was nowhere to be seen. The little fellow felt a little wronged and pursed her little mouth. She tightly held the small sculpture in her hand and stared with slightly red eyes at the empty space outside the room. It was clearly a sunny and beautiful day, but Jojo's heart was not feeling well. She returned to her room dejectedly and sat down for a while. Only then did she slowly wash up like an old cow dragging a broken cart. The crown prince's sudden departure shook the court greatly. Although he had made ample preparations, his departure made many old officials feel as if the sky was about to collapse. Even though the great king had repeatedly assured him that the crown prince was only going to the 6 prefectures to seek a higher level of cultivation, and that he would return in due time, he was certain that the crown prince would return. However, the courtiers were still listless and did not have the energy to work. He felt as if the soul of the entire Mo kingdom had been sucked away with the departure of the crown prince. Even with the Empress Dowager assisting the great king in handling state affairs, the old great king, who was used to enjoying life, had suffered a lot these days. Mo Shishir and his group left with the prestige general Shi Guangfeng. Other than the second young master, Shi Guangyun, even the third young master, Shi Guangjin, was taken away. Arbor didn't know that third young master Shi Guangjin, this sentimental person, had asked Celestial Medicine Valley's Wenren Ningjing for medicine when Wu family's eldest Miss Wu Xiaosu was dying. However, when Wenren Ningjing saw Wu Xiaosu's condition, she only said 4 words: "No medicine works." When third young master Shi Guang saw that his sweetheart had died a tragic death, he immediately wanted to make trouble for Qiaomu. However, he was stopped by second young master Shi Guangyun, who had outstanding insight. Chapter 1548. When his father, Duke Qing, found out about the situation, he gave his youngest son a good beating and didn't want to care about his life or death. However, his eldest brother, Shi Guangfeng, took pity on this brainless third brother and was worried that he would be beaten to death by his father. Thus, he pleaded for him and said that he should take him to the military camp to gain experience and let him grow into a real man. From now on, he would be indomitable and would no longer be distracted by love and so on. Only then did he take the third young master away. Of course, Arbor naturally didn't know about these things. However, even if she knew, she would only sneer. Fortunately, everyone in Duke Qing's estate was intelligent. If everyone was like this third young master, Shi Guangjin, then Duke Qing's estate wouldn't exist for long. These 2 days, no matter how badly the great king was overwhelmed, the little crown princess still ate and drank as usual. However, there was one thing that her mother-in-law, Her Highness Empress Zhao, came to invite her every day and strolled here and there. It was as if she had to cultivate a good relationship with her in these 2 days. This mother-in-law of hers seemed to be happy and cheerful every day. However, when Arbor took out the little jade figure carved by Mo Lien and placed it in front of her mother-in-law, Empress Zhao immediately hugged the little jade sculpture and bawled. Arbor originally had a taut little face and let her cry bitterly. However, after crying for a quarter of an hour, her makeup was ruined and she looked quite pitiful. She stepped forward and hesitated for a while before reaching out and hooking her arm around Empress Zhao's shoulder. She patted her and said, Don't worry, I will bring him back soon. If the Tower of Punishment didn't let him go, she would go find him. After finding him, she would tear down the tower. With this thought in mind, Arbor's gaze became even more resolute as she nodded. Let's do it this way. Mother misses him, Empress Zhao cried until her handkerchief was wet. She tightly held the little Emolian jade sculpture and didn't let go. Arbor wanted to take the jade carving back, but seeing her holding it so tightly, there was a hint of sadness on her face. The little fellow's eyebrows twitched slightly, and she said proudly, "Forget it, I'll give this jade carving to you." "Really, daughter-in-law?" Empress Zhao wiped her tears and looked up at her while holding the jade carving. Arbor nodded gloomily. He didn't want to give it away. However, when he saw how much she missed her son and thought of his mother, Jojo's heart softened. Empress Zhao's tears turned into laughter. She used her sleeve to gently wipe away her tears. Thinking of the Crown Prince's words, she couldn't help but feel moved. Suddenly, she grabbed Xiao Qiao's hand and said softly, "Daughter-in-law, Mother hasn't seen you smile for so long. You're about to leave, can't you smile at Mother and let Mother have some thoughts?" The little stoic's face was taut with a solemn expression. Empress Zhao saw this little lady blink as if she had worked hard for a long time before a stiff smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Empress Zhao really burst into laughter this time. She reached out to hold the child's hand and lamented, "Daughter-in-law, Mother really regrets missing such a long time and not being able to get along with you properly. Mother is muddle-headed and only looks at the surface. I've lived for so many years in the depths of the palace, but I'm still so naive. I hope you can forgive Mother," Empress Zhao said softly. "Also, Mother still owes you a thank you." "No need," the little fellow replied stiffly and said dryly, "We're a family, there's no need for this." Kun Zhao smiled. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.